These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More info at HelloFresh.com, code TOM. The Hidden History of Big Brother in America, How the Death of Privacy and the Rise of Surveillance Threaten Us and Our Democracy by Thom Hartmann. More information at all book outlets. Wild Alaskan Company, 100% sustainable wild-caught seafood delivered right to your door. More info at wildalaskancompany.com/Tom. Cozy Earth, better sleep, better you. More info at cozyearth.com, promo code TOM. The latest views and opinions from U.S. politics and other fascinating subjects too, including cutting-edge science reports at hartmanreport.com. And Dinovite, a whole food supplement for your pet's immune system. More info at dinovite.com.
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is The Hidden History of Big Brother in America, How the Death of Privacy and the Rise of Surveillance Threaten Us and Our Democracy. This is from the introduction, titled The Big Picture of Social Control versus Democracy. This book deals with two very large and often amorphous concepts, privacy and surveillance in the context of government and the marketplace. Both concepts have undergone changes over the millennia of recorded human history, and those changes have dramatically sped up and expanded over the past few centuries, starting with the widespread use of the printing press in the mid to late 15th century, when books and newspapers began to proliferate across Europe, and in the rest of the civilized world by the end of the 17th century, civilized in quotes. The development of radio, television, and the internet in the 20th century heightened the need to define more clearly what both concepts meant and how they applied both to governments, the public sector, and to individual and corporate players, the private sector. The thought police and Big Brother are terms introduced into the popular lexicon by George Orwell in his novel 1984. Big Brother was the overweening, all-powerful government of Orwell's novel, and the thought police were those who managed to burrow so deeply into every citizen's behavior, speech, and even thoughts that they could control or punish behavior based on the slightest deviations from orthodoxy. Orwell was only slightly off the mark. Big Brother types of government and thought police types of social control are now widespread in the world and incompatible with democracy, as I'll show in more detail later in the book. Most concerning for Americans and citizens of other democratic nations, in quote, the mentality of both has heavily infiltrated both American government and corporate sectors, reaching so deeply into the day-to-day details of our lives that the techniques and technologies they use can and do not only control, but predict our behavior. The goals of those who violate privacy and use surveillance is almost always social control and behavior modification. Setting aside pure voyeurism, these are the areas where money is made, power is accumulated, and political or business goals are reached. And whether they are of government or of corporate Big Brother, the goals are largely the same and consistent with those just mentioned. Secrets are now for government and giant corporations to know and hold, but not for average people. And they're used by Big Brother to both acquire and hold power. J. Edgar Hoover had secrets to hide, for example, so he knew well their power. A gay man at the pinnacle of American power for most of his life, the FBI director knew that in many U.S. states, he and his lover, Clyde Tolson, could be prosecuted and sent to prison for their private, consensual behavior. Yet Hoover and Tolson lived together, and their relationship was an open secret among Washington's cognoscenti. I still remember a beautiful summer day in Ireland, Louise and I sitting in the living room of author Anthony Summers and his wife Robin, as they described to us the shocking details of Hoover's life and abuses of power they'd uncovered writing Official and Confidential, The Secret Life of J. Edgar Hoover. That books like Summers weren't published until after Hoover's death is a striking test to the power of surveillance and the blackmail material it can produce to keep powerful people's secrets hidden even from the world's best investigative journalists. Every politician or reporter of any consequence knew that Hoover had a file on him. They were almost all men back then, and powerful men at that time were far more likely to harbor salacious secrets, ensuring Hoover an unbroken hold over the FBI from its founding in 1935 to his 1977 death. But Hoover didn't use his massive FBI surveillance powers just to cow politicians and reporters. He was also interested in advancing policies close to his heart. A dedicated white supremacist running an FBI where all meaningful power was held in white hands throughout his life, Hoover, or an underling at his behest, famously sent FBI surveillance tapes of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. having an extramarital affair to the civil rights leader himself, implying that they'd next go to his wife and the public if he didn't commit suicide. Hoover also spent his entire career downplaying the role of Italian organized crime in the United States because, among other things, mafia godfather Santo Trafficante had the goods on his sexual orientation and regularly hosted him and Tolson for gambling junkets. When, in 1961, Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy overruled Hoover and began prosecuting the mob, with the number of cases brought shooting up from dozens annually to over 700 a year in the early 1960s, the mafia backlash eventually destroyed the Kennedy dynasty. There's a more modern story of how surveillance and invasions of privacy have impacted American politics. The rise to the presidency of serial rapist, wannabe fascist, and crooked businessman Donald Trump. The biggest big brother of the corporate world, Facebook, had for years been compiling massive troves of personal data on Americans, even Americans without a Facebook.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Hey, happy Friday, TGIF, Shabbat Shalom, Juma Mubarak, whatever it may be for you. The end of the week is here for all of us. It is Anything Goes Friday. It's just you and me for 3 hours. We get to hang out. I've got a pile of news about what's going on in Ukraine, what's going on in Russia. I've got a rant to share with you. In the second hour, I want to get into Ketanji Brown Jackson. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. I think I am. Also, crazy alert and an ouch alert. The Russian space chief says he could let the International Space Station crash into the U.S. if our sanctions proceed. This is getting weird. In our third hour, will hackers come to the rescue of Ukraine? And by the way, while you weren't watching, Florida passed its horrible Don't Say Gay bill. It's gone to the Florida House. It's now gone to the Florida Senate. So we'll dig into all those things as we go through the program. But I want to start with my rant from this morning. It's published over at HartmannReport.com. And it's titled, Republicans Siding with Putin Loathe Democracy and Honest Elections. And I started out by pointing out that about a month ago, when it looked like this might be coming down the road, Senator Bob Menendez, the Democrat from New Jersey, introduced legislation in the Senate that would have strengthened Ukraine's ability to fight back against an invasion and given President Joe Biden some really powerful sanctions. One of the main things was the Lend-Lease Act. Back in 1941, Britain was under bombardment. It was the height of the Blitz. And Britain was just, missiles were just, and bombs were just being poured down on Great Britain by Germany. And Churchill reached out to FDR and said, we need your help. We need military equipment, and we need it now. Now, under the law, the only way that the United States could have provided that, if they gave it to England or if they sold it to England, it would have functionally required or been, there's a dispute about this, but nonetheless, in essence, would have been a declaration of war against Germany. And FDR did not want to get into World War II at that point. This was, before Pearl Harbor, and, which happened at the end of the year, on December 5th of that year. So instead, what FDR did is he got Congress to pass a bill called the Lend-Lease Act, which said that the United States could lend military equipment to another country or lease it to another country, but not give it to them and not sell it to them. So it's it's legally still the property of the United States, which means that we are not, by legal standards and international definitions, we have not become a party to the conflict. So Menendez's bill would have allowed President Biden to use the Lend-Lease Act to send billions of dollars worth of defensive equipment to Ukraine, surface-to-air missiles, an anti-tank weapon, all kinds of stuff. I mean, heavy-duty stuff that Ukraine could have used to defend itself. That bill also included $2.7 billion in security assistance that we have committed to Kiev since 2014, but that President Trump, blocked the same day that President Zelensky said, no, I won't trash Joe Biden to help your election. Trump retaliated by blocking our foreign aid to Ukraine. So this bill would have done both things. It would have given Biden the ability to send weaponry and defensive weaponry to Ukraine through the Lend-Lease Act, and it would have given $2.7 billion to Ukraine so that they could strengthen their own defenses. The bill was killed by Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz, who had been doing this whole grandstanding thing about how he didn't want the Nord Stream 2 pipeline to go into operation, and we need to block Germany from doing it, which you just don't do with your allies. You don't mess in Germany's internal affairs. But Cruz was out grandstanding about this, trying to pretend that he was this tough guy. And so when this piece of legislation came up, Cruz put a hold on it, so it couldn't get to the floor of the Senate. And, he said it was because of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, which had nothing to do with the legislation. I think it's fairly obvious he was simply trying to kneecap the Biden administration. Anything to hurt Joe Biden, anything to make a Democrat look bad, even if it compromises American national security. That's just fine with Ted Cruz. So that was last week. So Wednesday, day before yesterday, the night that missiles were raining down on Ukraine, as that was happening, Ted Cruz was down in Mar-a-Lago partying hard with Donald Trump, along with Marsha Blackburn, the Republican senator who had put a hold on the entire U.S. budget. Keep in mind, the Pentagon's still operating on last year's budget. And we're halfway into this year. I mean, the fiscal year started way back in October of last year. So Marsha Blackburn had put a hold on the entire budget because she said that Biden wanted to give out free crack pipes. And then the third U.S. Republican senator who was down at Mar-a-Lago watching the bombs fall on Ukraine and presumably cheering it on was Lindsey Graham, the Trump lapdog. Trump said to this group, these sycophants, quote, Putin is smart. He's taken over a country for $2 worth of sanctions. I'd say that's pretty smart. The day before, on Tuesday, Mike Pompeo had said, Putin's very shrewd, very capable. I have enormous respect for him. Well, I think that Pompeo was right. I think that Putin is really strong and really capable. Just don't think he's using that strength and capability in a way that's going to be to the benefit of either Russia or the world. In fact, my personal opinion on this is that Putin got punked by President Xi of China. Putin went over to the Olympics, hung out with Xi. He's had over 40 meetings with him now, and Xi said, "Oh, you want to take Ukraine? Sounds like a great idea." Now, why would Xi say that? Because he's thinking of taking Taiwan, and he wants to see how the world is going to respond if a major nuclear power seizes another country. What will America do? What will the European Union do? What will Australia do? What will Japan and South Korea and Taiwan do? Taiwan, I mean, that's his target. And so I think, and this is just my speculation. I have literally nothing to base this on other than the observed fact that Putin goes to China. Putin has a meeting with Xi. Xi comes out and says, yeah, if he's going to invade Iraq, that's fine, or Ukraine, that's fine with us. And then Putin goes ahead and does it. I don't think he would have taken Ukraine if the president of China had said don't. I really don't think he would have. And now Xi gets to see exactly what kind of arsenal we have and what kind of backbone we have. And frankly, I don't think it's looking all that strong. So anyhow, as I said, I think that this is going to backfire on Putin, and I'll get into that in just a minute. So, basically, bottom line here, why is Trump praising Putin? Why is Pompeo praising Putin? Why are Republican senators, like Blackburn and Cruz and Lindsey Graham, why are they partying hard with Donald Trump while the bombs are falling in Kiev? Well, because they hate democracy. Republicans haven't won a national election, a nationwide election, an initial nationwide, not a re-election, but an election. The Republicans haven't won a nationwide election since 1988. The last time a Republican president was put into office with a majority of the voters in America was George Herbert Walker Bush in 1988. That was it. Every Republican since then has won the Electoral College, but not the popular vote. Americans are just not that into Republicans. And when you consider the wackadoodle stuff that the Republicans are proposing, like Senator Rick Scott's most recent proposal, that everybody in America who's already paying withholding taxes, Social Security tax, Medicare tax, should, in addition to pay income tax, even if they're only making $6,000 a year, even if they're only making $15,000 a year working at McDonald's, they should be paying income tax. We need to lower the taxes on the billionaires and raise the taxes on average working Americans. That's Rick Scott's proposal. In addition to privatizing Medicare, killing Social Security, and turning it over to the Wall Street banks. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. And so Americans are like, Republicans, no thanks. So what do the Republicans do? I mean, this is the same problem that Putin had when he had serious opposition from Alexei Navalny. What did he do? He put his opponent in prison. What are Republicans trying to do? Well, Donald Trump in 2016 tried to put Hillary Clinton in prison. He's still trying to put Hillary Clinton in prison. John Durham still holds his office that Trump appointed him to as special prosecutor, and he's still turning out red meat for Fox News and the right-wing media. But that's probably not going to happen in the United States. So what's plan B for the Republicans? Make it hard to vote. In fact, frighten the hell out of, in particular, black voters by putting them in prison. Crystal Mason was sentenced to 5 years in prison in Texas for trying to vote while she was on parole. Same thing with Pamela Moses, who got 6 years in Tennessee for the same crime. Neither of them actually voted. Both are black. Meanwhile, dozens of white people have been charged with voter fraud, virtually all of them for voting illegally for Donald Trump. None of them have gone to jail. This is a massive nationwide Republican effort to disparage elections, to frighten voters, and it has thrown American democracy into a crisis. Freedom House came out with their annual report just this week, and they said that, America, quote, democracy's defenders sustained heavy new losses in their struggle against authoritarian foes, shifting the international balance in favor of tyranny. Where is it happening? Here in the United States. And I won't quote the whole thing. If you want to read it, it's over at HartmannReport.com. But this is what's going on. The Republicans are trying to trash democracy because it doesn't work for them anymore. It's harder and harder for them to get elected. And like I said, they haven't won a national election, an initial national election, since 1988, 34 years ago. Demographics are against them. The American people are against them. Their stupid ideas are not popular. And so this is what they do. They spend millions on think tanks and websites. Yesterday, I was Googling a topic for an article I was writing. The first seven hits I got were all right-wing sites, every single one of them. It's amazing how they're flooding the zone. And then, of course, they're supporting, over 1,500 right-wing talk radio stations, hundreds of right-wing television stations. They're supporting right-wing podcasters. They're damaging faith in democracy and our elections that are its foundation. They're fielding an army of trolls on social media, and they're threatening Democratic voters with prison. Freedom House said, quote, the exposure of U.S. democracy's vulnerabilities has grave implications for the cause of global freedom. But, as I note in my op-ed today, it also keeps Republicans in power, and for them, that's all that matters.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Back with more of the news of the day. I got to fill you in on what's going on in Ukraine and Russia. It's startling. And your calls, of course. It's Anything Goes Friday. And welcome back. And let's see here, Larry in Everett, Washington. Hey, Larry, what's on your mind today?
Well, just a few key factors. The situation is Trump. I'm almost positive. I wish I had a little mouse or someone that could go into Trump's little phone directory at the moment and find out that he's been in contact with Twerp, I call him, instead of the man's name. I would rather call him to find out that he has been in contact with him.
Are you talking about the president of Russia?
Yes, I'm saying that I'll use his name. Trump has been in contact. I wish we had a little mouse that could record what conversations have been going on, giving him plan by plan.
I'd love to know what was said at Helsinki back, for 3 years ago. I mean, when they threw everybody out of the room except the Russian translator.
Absolutely, and then Trump is paying back Zelensky simply because he wouldn't say yes to everything, all of his commands.
Yep.
And then 15 years ago, literally, Putin was practically broke. His country was going broke because then they wound up buying oil and oligarchies, not oligarchies, but our oligarchies went in and bought and under who knows what money went from what channel to boost Putin economically with his oil and his corporation.
Yep.
To create what made him a billionaire in less than a year. And the eyes of America right now are all on Europe, while the Republicans are partying, as you say, at the very moment, are partying, and they're undermining our Constitution and breaking our system down. That is what this is all about.
Well, there are some green shoots, Larry. I don't know if you caught Ben Sass, the Republican senator from Nebraska, this morning on CNN, but he just came out and gave it to Putin with both barrels, and also to Xi. I mean, he suggested too that Xi greenlit this operation for Putin. And that President Xi of China is using Putin as a test, as a test flag or a test operation.
I heard you say that, but the problem is that China just opened up the doors for their wheat. They lifted the sanctions for their wheat and opened up their operations. So now Russia can get their wheat in there, feed the soldiers, and feed everybody he needs to feed now, because China is opening doors for Russia now, whereas.
No, I get it. China's going to support Russia as much as they can and as long as they can, because this is the grand experiment. They're going to assume reciprocity. When they go after Taiwan, they're going to want Russia to support them.
Absolutely, sir. That's I'm very proud of you and what you do, and I wish I listened to you every day in my vehicle when I deliver parts. I'm very proud of who you are. And I only hope that America can open up their eyes. I want somebody to create a sticker saying the word Trump and then put a circle and an X over MP and put TH instead. Call it Trump exit truth. We need truth.
Okay, truth. Yes, truth is a good idea. Your phone is breaking up there, Larry. Larry, thank you for the call. 22 minutes past the hour. We'll be back with more of the news of I got to tell you what's going on in Ukraine and Russia, and then I'll pick up your phone calls. So we'll be right back after I read a quick ad on the other side of the show here on the commercial side. Hey, I've got a new book out. It's called The Hidden History of Big Brother in America, How the Death of Privacy and the Rise of Surveillance Threaten Us and Our Democracy. Available wherever you find fine books. So how do you know which party has the most crooks in it? You know, the Republicans are always saying, oh, those Democrats are soft on crime and, you know, a lot of murders in Democrat-run cities. Well, for the record, first off, red states and red counties have a higher per capita murder rates than do blue states and blue counties. This is just a fact. But secondly, let's look at some of the administrations. I mean, the Obama administration had no criminal indictments. The Jimmy Carter administration had 1. The Bill Clinton administration had 2. But what about the Republican administrations? It was 16 for George W. Bush. It was 26 criminal indictments for Ronald Reagan. Richard Nixon's administration had 76 criminal indictments. And of course, the full-time professional rapist and grifter, Donald Trump, he had 215 criminal indictments. So who's really soft on crime? We got a video about it over at ThomHartmann.com. You can check it out. Welcome back. So let me just run. I got just a pile of what's going on here, and you know what we need to keep an eye on as well. It's really turning into an absolutely remarkable story. The Ukrainian ambassador says that an entire Russian platoon has surrendered to Ukrainian forces. Now, keep in mind, this is fog of war time. We're going to hear stories that reflect poorly and well on both Russian and Ukrainian forces, and some of them are just going to be made-up stuff, and some of them are going to be absolutely true. And sitting at this desk, it's really hard to tell which is which. But this is being reported by The Hill and apparently being taken very seriously. The Ukrainian ambassador to the United States, Oksana Markarova, said yesterday that a platoon of Russian soldiers, this is the 74th Motorized Brigade from Kemerovo Oblast, I think Oblast means like state, surrendered. The ambassador says, quote, they didn't know that they were brought to Ukraine to kill Ukrainians. They thought they were doing something else. Meanwhile, the Committee of Soldiers' Mothers, it's it's like a veterans organization in Russia, is claiming that Vladimir Putin's officials beat and tricked their own military soldiers in order to get them to invade Ukraine. This is over at Raw Story right now. Well, actually, it's from the Daily Beast. They said they are switching entire regiments to contract soldiers, although the guys did not submit any formal request to this and took no such initiative. There are instances of physical violence and beatings of those who refuse to become contract soldiers, and after that, it's completely unknown what happens to them. This is one of the soldiers who say, no, I don't want to go to Ukraine, and shoot at people who might be my cousin. And if they do, they vanish, basically. They take away their phones. We've had a flurry of calls from scared mothers all over Russia. They are crying. They don't know if their children are alive or healthy. He went on to call it a complete catastrophe. British Defense Minister Ben Wallace released footage, actual satellite footage, of mobile crematoriums that the Russian soldiers are bringing along with them so that they can hide the sight of dead Russian soldiers from the world. He said they will completely evaporate the bodies. Meanwhile, protests in Russia. I'll tell you about that on the other side of the break, and then I'll pick up your phone calls. It's getting strange out there. It's getting very strange out there. By the way, be very, very careful. I got 3 of these this morning. Text messages saying that they're from Amazon or anybody else that have a link in them. Do not hit that link. They will take your phone.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Never click a link in a text message, even if it looks like it's from somebody you know, unless you're 100% sure. Our book today is Can We All Be Feminists? It's a collection of essays edited by Jane Eric Udori. This first chapter, or first essay, is from Charlotte Shane. It's called No Wave Feminism. If you feel like feminism is failing you, you're not alone. I sometimes have the impression that I'm as thoroughly feminist as I am thoroughly human. That feminism is as intrinsic to my contribution to my constitution as my skeleton is to my body. But in my 35 years, I've struggled with or outright rejected feminism on several occasions. First, as an ignorant adolescent, what do women need feminism for if they already got the vote? Then, as a sex worker who saw how regularly and even gleefully feminists stoked the public's long-standing antipathy toward professionally sexual women. And now again, as someone moving even further into the far left, who cannot abide the forms of feminism that embrace and are complicit with the worst aspects of liberalism. The more I learn about the intersecting oppressive forces that continue to shape the Western world, colonialism, patriarchy, capitalism, xenophobia, and racism, and the network of cruel social machinery to which these systems give rise, incarceration, crippling debt, disenfranchisement, deportation, and so on, the less sense it makes to use gender as the primary lens through which to regard human-engineered suffering. Feminism doesn't feel like the sharpest weapon to wield against white supremacy or border policing, for instance, or even the best tool with which to approach basic civic concerns like vibrant schools. That's not because those issues don't impact women. Obviously, they directly and indirectly impact many. But they don't necessarily impact women more or in dramatically different ways than they do men. In other words, the most significant challenges these issues present aren't tethered to one's sex. And so prioritizing gender above other aspects of identity limits one's realm of ethical responses. Here's an example. American prisons often keep female prisoners shackled while they give birth. There are variations on the theme. Some women are shackled during labor, some are unshackled, but then shackled again almost immediately afterward. And almost all are shackled while heavily pregnant. There's some variation of what shackling entails, too. It can mean being cuffed at the wrists or at the ankles, or both, or cuffed to a hospital bed or chained at the waist. Articulating these details makes the sadism even starker. A class-action federal lawsuit in 2017 alleged more than 40 women at the Milwaukee County Jail suffered this horror. It was preceded by lawsuits in 2014 and 2016 against that same jail for similar practice. But the appalling practice is hardly confined to one city or one state. In 2015, New York prisons were found to be shackling prisoners in labor in spite of a state law that made it illegal to do so. And according to a 2016 report by the Prison Birth Project and Prisoners' Legal Services of Massachusetts, jails and prisons in Massachusetts were guilty of similar violations. Most feminists probably agree that this is a feminist issue. The topic accordingly receives coverage on feminist websites and sometimes in women's magazines. But does a feminist obligation to attend to the rights of the imprisoned extend only as far as pregnancy and labor? Or is it a feminist issue when a non-pregnant woman is shackled? Or when she is caged for years and exploited for her labor, denied face-to-face visits from loved ones, held captive in a compound in the name of, quote, justice? If the answer to these questions is yes, then it is also a feminist issue. Then is it also a feminist issue when men are shackled during various health emergencies, seizures, say? In 2014, a male inmate in Colorado died after undergoing several seizures while in restraints and receiving no medical treatment. Is it a feminist issue when incarcerated men are denied the right to visit with family or exploited for their labor? Is it a feminist issue when so many men are raped while in prison? Or does feminism's responsibility begin and end with gender-based mistreatment? The feminists hired by prominent media outlets often advocate for measures that would result in higher levels of incarceration. They write op-eds in favor of further criminalization around sex work and call for longer prison sentences for men convicted of assault, which we've known for decades is not necessarily synonymous with men who committed the crime. They also disturbingly relish the theater of sentencing, like that enacted by Judge Rosemary Aquilina, who told serial sexual abuser Larry Nassar that if she could, she would allow some or many people to do to him what he did to others. So sexual violation is an atrocity unless it happens to the right person. They capitalize on women's justified fear and anger around mistreatment by men to shore up the status quo, to suggest that our current problems are not the result of fundamentally unjust institutions, but rather institutions that are only incidentally sexist. That means that those same institutions could become less so with the right adjustments,
like more draconian sentencing for crimes against women or more female judges. But the prison system is racist and brutal by design, not by accident or mismanagement, just as the court system regularly fails the most vulnerable because it was built to protect the powerful. The challenge of the 21st century is not to demand equal opportunity to participate in the machinery of oppression, revolutionary thinker Angela Davis has written. Rather, it is to identify and dismantle those structures. Yet leveraging our existing legal system for criminalization remains the go-to strategy for most feminists when it comes to dealing with objectionable behavior. The book, Can We All Be Feminists?
Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. Welcome back. This is proving to be a difficult a meal to swallow for Russia, at least so far. And like I said, I think China set them up for it as a test run. But in any case, more than 150 senior Russian officials just signed an open letter condemning the invasion of Ukraine. These are Russians in Russia. I could go through the list, but there are Russian names that you would probably not be familiar with, but I'll give you some context. The letter, which described the signatories as those elected by the people, this is from the Daily Mail, by the way, in the United Kingdom, as those elected by the people, said they, quote, unreservedly condemn the attack of the Russian army on Ukraine. This is an unprecedented atrocity for which there is no and cannot be justification. The decision to attack was made personally by Russian President Vladimir Putin. We are convinced that the citizens of Russia did not give him such a mandate. Keep in mind, these are Russians. Hopes, they warned of catastrophic consequences, said thousands of people will die, be injured and maimed. Cities dear to many Russians will be destroyed. Hopes for a good life in Russia are crumbling before our eyes, the letter said. We urge you not to participate in the aggression and not to approve of it. Please don't be silent. Only massive popular condemnation here in Russia can now stop this war. And it goes on from there. These absolutely extraordinary protests going on in Russia right now. Some of the folks were holding placards. This is huge. I mean, all across Russia, 53 cities last night, 53 cities. Russian police arrested 1,667 protesters, 957 of them just in Moscow. They were holding placards that said no war or Putin go away or no occupation of Ukraine. This is amazing. And here are some of the people who have added their names to these, that list that I was just telling you about, the open letter and just speaking out. Socialite and former presidential candidate Ksenia Sobchak wrote on Instagram, "We, the Russians, will be dealing with the consequences of today for many years to come. Now I will only believe in the worst scenarios." One of Russia's most famous television comedians, kind of the Russian Conan O'Brien, his name is Ivan Urgant. He posted on Instagram, "Fear and pain, no to war." Maxim Galkin, who is a singer and also a TV host in Russia, he said, "I've been in touch with my relatives and friends from Ukraine since this morning. I can't even explain in words how I feel. This is impossible. How is this possible?" Yelena Kovalskaya, director of the state-funded Moscow Theater, just quit her job and said on Facebook, "It's impossible to work for a killer and get paid by him." Authorities are cracking down hard on these folks. Marina Litvinovich, who is a well-known Russian human rights activist, was arrested as she left her Moscow home this morning after posting on Facebook that Russians should protest. Russian police officers detained the Ukrainian pop singer in Russia, Olga Romanovskaya, during a protest in Moscow. Another human rights advocate, Led Pomenavyov, started a petition against the invasion that had, by Friday morning, 330,000 signatures. More than 250 Russian scientists and journalists signed another open letter declaring strong protest to what they called the fatal step by Russia's leader. They said, quote, "There is no rational justification for this war." And a coalition of 30 independent Russian media outlets also spoke out against the massacre. This by Emma Reynolds from this inews.co.uk. Against, quote, "the massacre started by the Russian leadership, promising to be, quote, honest about what is happening while we have this opportunity." That's 30 different Russian media outlets. And an anti-war petition started by the Kommersant Business Daily Report, Elena Chemenko, on Telegram was signed by at least 100 journalists. We, Russian media correspondents and experts who write about Russian foreign policy, condemn the military operation launched by the Russian Federation in Ukraine. War has never been and never will be a method of resolving conflicts, and there is no justification for it, they said. Meanwhile, in Ukraine, a Ukrainian soldier, Vitaly Skakun, was part of a Marine infantry battalion fighting to fend off a column of Russian tanks that were heading for a major bridge. It was called the Heneshek Bridge in the Kherson region of Ukraine. The Ukrainian troops made the decision to blow up the bridge. This young man, I think he's 22 years old, volunteered to go out on the bridge and blow it up. He did. He died blowing up the bridge, but it stopped the movement of the Russians. The President Zelensky said, quote, "This morning we are defending our country alone. Just like yesterday, the most powerful country in the world looked on from a distance." He's referring to us, the United States. He added, "Russia was hit with sanctions yesterday, but these are not enough to get these foreign troops off our soil." To the citizens of the Russian Federation who went out to protest, I want to say, we see you. This means you heard us. This means you are starting to believe us. Fight for us. Fight against the war. So, phew, a lot going on. All right, let me pick up your phone calls and see what your thoughts are on all this. Kate in New York City. Hey, Kate, thanks for listening to Sirius XM. What's up?
Hi, Tom. Am I allowed to talk about something aside from Russia right now?
Yeah, it's Anything Goes Friday. You can talk about anything you want.
Okay, so this story has kind of been buried that came out yesterday because of the Ukraine coverage regarding these two prosecutors in the Manhattan DA's office who abruptly resigned amid reports that Alvin Bragg, who's the new DA that just took over there, apparently thinks he can't get an indictment on the Trump investigation. And, you know, it's quite puzzling why this would happen, why they resigned abruptly and why Bragg is pulling back.
I think somebody got to him.
Yeah.
I mean, Trump has connections to the literally mafia families in New York City.
Right. And it's surprising to me because, you know, Bragg has come under fire because he's apparently, you know, not wanting to prosecute certain low-level crimes because he wants to go after the big fish. And this is about the biggest fish of all. So, yeah. It's unfortunate this story happened to drop at a really bad time because all the focus is on Russia. And I just don't, I'm concerned that it's just going to fade away and we're not going to get any clear coverage on this.
I think that's exactly what's going to happen, Kate, and thank you for bringing it up and mentioning it. I know nothing about Alvin Bragg, the new district attorney in Manhattan. He replaces Cyrus Vance Jr., who I knew a lot about. But I know nothing about this guy. I don't live in New York. I didn't see the election coverage. I'm assuming he's elected. Do you know anything? Can you fill us in a little bit? Who he is, where he came from, what he's all about, what he's done?
His main concern is he wants to improve racial relations. He's an African-American man, and he believes that there's a lot of low-level crime being prosecuted. And I was a public defender for 10 years in New York, so I can agree that there's a lot of these cases like the turnstile jumpers and whatnot. They do clog up the system. And so he's pulling back on those kind of prosecutions. But some people feel he's gone too far because, for example, if somebody holds you up with a gun and the gun is plastic, he's not going to charge you with attempted robbery. And there's been a rash of crimes happening, such as people walking into a CVS and walking out with a bag of goods because they know they're not going to be arrested under this new regime. And as much as the lower level crimes do clog up the system, the result is we have a lot of lawlessness going on right now, and that's not good either. So, it's just surprising because if this man is in there with a mandate to try to, help people that are mentally disturbed rather than prosecute them and put the full prosecution efforts on the serious criminals, this is a strange way to do it, by letting Trump go.
Yeah, I get it. I absolutely get it. And the fact that the two prosecutors, one of whom was probably the most famous organized crime prosecutor in America, one of these two prosecutors who resigned apparently in disgust. I mean, they're not making any public statements, which is, I don't know, maybe that's a condition of their employment, or maybe they just, they're being respectful, but it really stinks to high heaven to me too, Kate. Kate, thanks a lot for bringing it up. I appreciate the call. Jessica in Chicago. Hey, Jessica, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. I 100% agree with you that those two prosecutors were probably threatened and their families were probably threatened.
Or the new DA was.
Yeah, all of them probably. And your rant was brilliant, and I thank you for your coverage on all of our threats. And I'm like hair on fire because I'm concerned for the whole planet, because I heard Russia took a hold of the nuclear isolation area in Chernobyl.
Right.
And the thing about that is there are 15 nuclear reactor plants in Chernobyl, in Ukraine. And I was watching Democracy Now! Linda Gunter said if one of those is destroyed, it could be a chain reaction.
Yeah, no, there is a huge concern about the 15 nuclear power plants that are operating right now in Ukraine and supplying electricity to that country. And the Chernobyl thing, I think, is a completely separate point, because Chernobyl, if you look at a map, Chernobyl is basically on the path from, as I recall, Belarus to Ukraine. And the Chernobyl exclusion zone is a 19-mile, I believe it's a radius, it might be a diameter, but it's a 19-mile circle, essentially, around the Ukraine, the crippled Ukrainian reactor. And this old road that could be used by and other things to run right up, from Belarus into Ukraine, runs right through that exclusion zone. And so the best guess is that the reason why they grabbed Chernobyl was because they wanted to secure that road. And
plus, they are saying that the tanks driving through there have caused radiation to come back into the atmosphere.
Yeah, they're stirring the dust up. Right, they're stirring up, radioactive dust is really, really heavy stuff. Radioactive isotopes are real heavy, like lead is heavier than steel. Radiation is heavier than lead. And radioactive elements. And yes, now they're being stirred up by all this, and it's measurable. Jessica, thank you. Thanks for sharing that. We'll be right back. It's 46 minutes past the hour.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Anything Goes Friday, just you and me for 3 hours here. We'll continue with your calls on the other side of this break. And welcome back. David in Searcy, Arkansas. Hey, David, what's up?
Nothing much, Tom. Tom, excuse me. Here is my bold and daring solution to the problem in Ukraine.
Okay.
Allow me to set it up.
All right.
A long time ago, I saw a painting. It was depicting an ancient battle, but it was done in the Renaissance stage, I believe. The castle on the back was with turrets and stuff, modernized, you might say, about an army that surrounded a castle. These people were in armor that wasn't appropriate, but anyhow. And the army in the castle went out to confront it. And then the women of the castle ran out with their children and went between the two armies and held them up. I believe that I've heard about evacuation. I think, and as I say, this is bold and daring, but what I've been listening to here lately, it might just be the straw that broke the camel's back. Instead of going to Poland. Instead of hiding in their apartments and cellars, get the Ukrainian women to surrender to the frontline Russian troops. This will slow down Russian troops. They're not set up to do it. You can get global acclaim and attention. You can even start it now in America. Hell, it's only 11 here or something.
I get what you're saying, David. And your historic precedents. I would remind you that armies have basically two mandates. Kill people and blow things up. They're not particularly good at taking prisoners or treating them well.
Scrutiny of the world.
And secondly, that one of the things that typically accompanies military occupations, and I certainly saw a lot of evidence of this when I was in Uganda in the final months of the Ugandan Civil War back in 1980 and 81, is rape. And soldiers go nuts. And I would be skeptical of that, but keep thinking. We've got to come up with something. David, thank you for the call. Jason in Homestead, Florida. Hey, Jason, what's on your mind?
Hey, Tom. I'm calling to make another submission of the political sports and beings rights or animal rights. I was calling because it's all intersectional, and you're dealing with like practices of one and the other. And even language. You use the word flood the zone. Mm-hmm. That's a basketball term.
Really?
And it's actually a football term as well.
Yeah.
So I don't know where it started first, but they intersect in between all these different topics and areas of life.
Yeah.
And one example I was going to give about this is the Miami Dolphins and the most recent violation that they did, and that most people don't even know because the NFL and the Miami Dolphins covered it up pretty well outside of Miami. Is that they had a star player, one of their best players on offense, if not the best player, was a wide receiver, and he went and found, and his name was Kenny Stills. He went out and found that Ross was working with Trump to do a fundraiser, and he posted it on social media. Was when he found out. Mm-hmm. The thing is that he was treated horribly during practice, afterwards for a couple of weeks, and then they found a way to work him in a trade, and he was gone.
Huh. Interesting.
Now, most people don't even know that. You can,
I'll have to check it out.
Research this stuff.
Jason,
don't take my word for it.
Yeah, I will take your word for it. Jason, thank you. It's fascinating, and thanks for watching us on Free Speech down there in Homestead, Florida. We'll be right back. Our 1 hour free podcast recaps our show, and it's available wherever fine podcasts are found. And we have the full 3 hour podcast available over at thomhartmann.com if you want to really support our program. An amazing story out of New Hampshire. The state legislature, this was after in Virginia, the new governor, Glenn Youngkin, who ran as I'm not Donald Trump, and then immediately put up a tip line for parents to turn in for parents to report their kids' teachers if they say something subversive. Now in New Hampshire, they've got a law that prohibits the dissemination of certain divisive concepts related to sex and race. Those divisive concepts being that people could be unconsciously racist. A conservative moms group has put up a $500 bounty in New Hampshire for the first person who can destroy the reputation and career of a teacher using this new law. So the teachers union sued the state of New Hampshire, and now the Republicans in New Hampshire, who control the state, are fighting back by putting up a new law that is going to require teachers to take a loyalty oath and ban any, quote, any negative account or representation of the founding and history of the U.S. It's nuts. There's a video about it over at thomhartmann.com. Check it out. Picking up your phone calls here on Anything Goes Friday. Jeff in Fort Dodge, Iowa. Hey, Jeff, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. I just want everybody to be aware that the Republican response next week to the State of the Union will be given by our governor, Kim Reynolds. And
really?
Yes, it should be quite interesting what she lays out here because she loathes Joe Biden. And I think we're going to hear the platform that they're going to run on in 2022 out of her lips.
Of course.
Yes. And one other thing, I'm hearing from a state senator here in Iowa saying the problem with our fuel prices is because Joe Biden got rid of the Keystone XL pipeline. Wasn't the Keystone XL pipeline supposed to take that stuff down to Texas or wherever, be refined, and then put on boats?
Yes, the Keystone, all of the oil in the Keystone XL pipeline was committed for export. Yeah.
Well, that's what they're selling Iowans, and these Iowans are licking it up like a puppy with fresh milk.
Yeah, I believe it. Okay, thanks a lot, Jeff. Thanks for the heads up. We'll keep an eye on it. Appreciate it. Carol in Monessen, Pennsylvania. Hey, Carol, what's on your mind?
Hi, Tom. This isn't why I called, but I do agree with several of your former callers. I believe that Trump gave Putin the green light to go into Ukraine. I absolutely
you mean
that.
President Xi of China, or
Donald Trump gave.
Oh, you think
Putin.
Trump did? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I do. I believe that. In fact, it wouldn't surprise me.
I think it probably worked the other way around. I think whatever Putin says, Trump says, "Oh, okay." Because Trump is terrified of him. I mean, the Russian oligarchs own Trump.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do. But anyway, and he hates the Ukraine, Trump does, so he wouldn't have been upset about it.
Zelensky wouldn't lie for him.
But that isn't why I called. I also believe that Trump will get away with everything. He's not going to be indicted. They'll get to everyone who tries to indict him.
Yeah, I think they're going to take down his business. Whether they'll succeed, I mean, there's multiple criminal prosecutions against him. Just because the Manhattan DA has wimped out, you've got the DA down in Fulton County, Georgia, who's going after him for trying to rig the election or trying to influence Brad Raffensperger.
Yeah. Well, I'm hoping. But anyway, the reason I called was I've lived in Pennsylvania most of my life, and it used to be a pretty blue state, as I recall. I don't recall ever having a red state here. Yep. But we have two real whack jobs running for Senate in the Republican Senate. Mm-hmm. One is Dr. Oz. Have you heard of him?
Oh, yeah. Mehmet Oz or something like that. Yeah, he's a TV star,
a TV star and a grifter and a real...
and he hustles vitamins, too, doesn't he?
Huh?
Doesn't he also hustle vitamins?
I think he does, although I honestly have never seen him, but I've heard, yeah. And also the other one is David McCormick, who is really crazy. I mean, he makes Dr. Oz look sane.
Wow.
He makes Dr. Oz look like a Democrat. Wow. But he's out to put Dr. Fauci in prison and make sure nobody wears masks or gets vaccinated. I mean, you name it, he's a real Trump supporter, too.
How's the Democratic primary doing there, Carol? Is your he's the Secretary of State, I believe?
Yes.
I'm drawing a blank on his name.
Me too, but he's a wonderful man. And also Josh Shapiro is a wonderful man.
So you've got a couple of good candidates there.
Oh, yeah, we have some really great candidates. But I'm afraid that the name recognition of some of these other ones, like Dr. Oz, is going to
Well, that's what happened with Trump.
Hard.
Americans vote for TV stars. We did for Ronald Reagan, too.
Yeah, I know. It would be a disaster for this state.
Yeah.
It really would. Well, listen, you have a nice weekend, you and Louise.
Thank you. Thank you, Carol. It's great to hear from you. And happy Friday to you, too. I appreciate the call. We're going to hit the break in about 3 seconds here. So we'll be back on the other side of this break. It is Anything Goes Friday here on the Thom Hartmann Program. Stick around. We'll be back with your calls, whatever you'd like to talk about. I mean, I laid out what's going on in the news with regard to Russia and Ukraine. I've got a couple of other news stories that I'm going to share with you at the top of the next hour and at the top of the third hour. And we're going to get into Ketanji Brown Jackson's nomination. But, it's Anything Goes Friday. So whatever you want to talk about, give me a shout. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More info at HelloFresh.com, code TOM. The Hidden History of Big Brother in America, How the Death of Privacy and the Rise of Surveillance Threaten Us and Our Democracy by Thom Hartmann. More information at all book outlets. Wild Alaskan Company, 100% sustainable wild-caught seafood delivered right to your door. More info at wildalaskancompany.com/Tom. Cozy Earth, better sleep, better you. More info at cozyearth.com, promo code TOM. The latest views and opinions from U.S. politics and other fascinating subjects too, including cutting-edge science reports at hartmanreport.com. And Dinovite, a whole food supplement for your pet's immune system. More info at dinovite.com.
We say fight back!
Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Book Club. Today we're reading from Point to Point Navigation, a memoir by Gore Vidal. This is from the last two chapters, and we're reading from page 258. In 1961, a new president of the United States, John F. Kennedy, was inaugurated at the age of 43. With him, a new generation had taken the crown from the older generation as represented by General Eisenhower. There was triumphant talk of a new frontier, presumably to be crossed by all of us into a bright new land where the only shadow that marred the prospect was that of the hideous, murderous specter of international communism centered upon the Soviet Union, against whom JFK had sworn to bear any burden to ensure the ultimate victory of freedom, liberty, and so on. But early on, starting in 1959, under the general direction of then Vice President Richard Nixon, who had many interesting Cuban mob connections. Yes, Bibi Rebozo, his mysterious friend, was also linked not only to mobsters, but to the Cuban dictator Batista, who had been overthrown by Fidel Castro, to the annoyance of the mob, an annoyance that turned to fury when Castro shut down, if only briefly, the mafia-run Havana casinos. Elements of the CIA were soon attempting to murder Castro, who, like all Nixon enemies, was, if not yet a communist, worst, a communist dupe. The presidential election of 1960 was a close one, fought by Nixon and John Kennedy, an attractive Massachusetts senator whose father had, ironically, dealings with many mobsters during the pre-World War II period, as well as at the time of the prohibition of alcohol. The late film producer Ray Stark told me how, during the short presidency of JFK, Joe Kennedy and Frank Costello, the retired New York mob overlord, would often have dinner at Kennedy's Central Park South apartment and rehash old crimes, often in the country of a retired teamster who gave great massages. Joe's mob connections were useful to Jack in the 1960 election and could easily have saved JFK's life in 1963 had Bobby Kennedy, in the interest of building himself up in the public eyes, not started arresting important mobsters, particularly in the so-called Appalachian Mob Conference, bust, where they had all come together to confer about the secession of the leadership of the New York mob. I've long since forgotten how I first heard of the plot to kill JFK, while I had no idea at all of the Kennedy brothers' plot to kill Castro on December 1st, 1963, until I read a recent book by Lamar Waldron and Thom Hartmann called Ultimate Sacrifice. It was assumed that the Cuban Missile Crisis of '62 had sufficiently alarmed JFK and Castro's mentor Khrushchev so that they jointly backed down, putting an end, so everyone thought, to such dangerous adventures. JFK had pledged not to invade Cuba if Castro would allow inspections of any remaining missiles on the island. Since Castro did not cooperate, JFK then regarded his pledge as inoperative. In the spring of 1963, according to Ultimate Sacrifice, more a literal than an ironic title, John and Robert Kennedy started laying the groundwork for a coup against Fidel Castro that would eventually be set for what they called C-Day, December 1st, 1963. Bobby, like Nixon before him, was in charge of what would be the most secretive operation of its sort in our history. Since the CIA had, in the eyes of the Kennedys, botched the 1961 Bay of Pigs invasion, the Department of Defense was to be in charge of this adventure, which would first engage mob hitmen to assassinate Castro and then replace Castro with a provisional government that would implore the United States to come to its aid and restore order. Ours is a society riddled with plots of every kind, from, let's say, one to bribe certain members of Congress to cheat Indians off of their casino money, to the financing, often secretly, of numerous presidential elections, while simultaneously great companies like Enron cheat customers, stockholders, and employees. Yet everyone who draws attention to all of this corruption is quickly denounced as a conspiracy theorist who means to undo the great fiction that anything truly wicked, at least in the murder line, must be the work of a solitary lone nut who is simply evil. Hence the setting up of Lee Harvey Oswald as the lone crazed killer of JFK, despite his own brief but presumably accurate statement after his Dallas arrest, "I'm the patsy." Then, as planned, his being gunned down by Jack Ruby, a fellow CIA asset. Oswald as lone killer for no reason at all, and addled Ruby, a one-time Chicago mobster who claimed to be deeply worried about the stress all this must be causing the widow Kennedy. And he goes on in Chapter 55. Ultimate Sacrifice describes how the Kennedy C-Day plan was penetrated by three mafia godfathers, Carlos Marcello, New Orleans, Santo Traficante, Tampa, Florida, and Johnny Roselli out of Chicago. All three were being vigorously pursued by Attorney General Robert Kennedy, along with a dozen of their associates, of whom 6 were also working on the Castro murder case. The crime bosses then used parts of the C-Plan, a.k.a. AM World, to arrange JFK's assassination in a way that would prevent a thorough government investigation in order to protect the coup plan, its participants, as well as, naturally, national security by invoking the secrecy surrounding the C-Plan. The mob bosses targeted JFK twice before Dallas, once in Chicago on November 2nd, JFK called off his motorcade, and then in Tampa on November 18th. He survived unscathed. Ultimate Sacrifice reveals and details why Robert Kennedy later told several close associates the name of the godfather, Carlos Marcello, who had ordered his brother killed. But he couldn't do anything about it for fear the Soviets might go to war. Ironic and tragic action. I recalled when over the years I'd asked why what happened at Dallas happened, I'd answer, because Bobby had broken a truce made with the mob by Joe Kennedy in 1960. The book, Point-to-Point Navigation by Gore Vidal.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back to the second hour of our program. It looks like Russian forces are not only on the outskirts of Kiev, but what the government of Ukraine is describing as sabotage forces have infiltrated Kiev to put bombs in places and just, basically sow chaos. Also, some of the Russian troops are apparently wearing Ukrainian uniforms to create confusion. So, this is just all over the place. There's a great summary of it over on dailycoast.com by Mark Sumner. It's right up at the top, Ukraine update. I'll just leave it at that. Also, the Associated Press is reporting, you'll recall yesterday, President Biden said he did not want to put sanctions on Putin himself, on President Putin himself. And the reason President Biden said he didn't want to do that, he didn't give this reason, but, most of the diplomats will tell you, is that, when you use all of your ammunition, you've got nothing left to negotiate with. I'm very ambivalent about that argument, and would frankly, I think stronger sanctions, are called for, but who knows? So, but the European Union apparently has decided to do it. This is the headline on the Associated Press, article by Raf Kassert and Foster Klug. It says, with a military intervention in Ukraine off the table for now, countries around the world are looking to heap more financial punishment. The EU's unanimous decision indicated that Western powers are moving toward unprecedented measures. The Latvian foreign minister, Edgars Renviks, tweeted that the 27-nation bloc's foreign ministers adopted the sanction package that includes the asset freeze, includes President of Russia and its foreign minister, Mr. Lavrov. And it is being reported right now by the New York Times, this was literally just 30 minutes ago, that Russia is limiting access within its country to Facebook because so many Russians are using Facebook to basically dissent, to say, no, we don't want this, we don't like this, we don't want to go here. Now, also in the news, President Biden has nominated Ketanji Brown Jackson, just an extraordinary woman from her credentials. I don't know her. I've read about her in the context of being one of the people who were being advanced. In fact, yesterday, a number of people were speculating that she was definitely the nominee because she's on the D.C. Circuit Court, or the Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia. And one of the cases that she was involved with just kind of got very quickly wrapped up. The same thing happened the day before Brett Kavanaugh's, because he was on the same court. The same thing happened the day before he was announced by Donald Trump as his nominee. So yesterday, everybody was speculating, hey, it's going to be Ketanji Brown Jackson. And yes, definitely. She has been a federal judge since 2013. She was first a trial judge in D.C. President Biden put her on the Court of Appeals for the district, for the D.C. Circuit, which is like the second most powerful court in the United States behind the Supreme Court, and is typically the launching pad into the Supreme Court. She was previously she's only 51 years old, by the way. She would be the second youngest person on the court. Amy Coney Barrett is younger than that. I don't recall her exact age. I think she's in her late 40s. But Brown would be, at age 51, would be the second youngest, which is great. A good, progressive, young person on the court. Just something that I learned about her background today that I thought was just absolutely fascinating. I got this from a piece that Ian Millhiser, who's just a great, he used to be a regular guest on our show. He's a lawyer and a great writer and commentator on the law. And his piece in Vox really informed me this morning. In 2003, she was in private practice, and she had a good gig, was making a lot of money. And she left that to spend 2 years working as a staffer for the U.S. Sentencing Commission. Then from there, she decided, in her own words, she said that she lacked quote, I lacked a practical understanding of the actual workings of the federal criminal justice system. So how do you get that practical knowledge of how the actual criminal justice system works? She became an assistant federal public defender in Washington, D.C., representing indigent clients at trial and arguing before the D.C. Circuit. I mean, this is like kind of the bottom of the heap in law in terms of pay, certainly, and in some cases in terms of status. So she took like multiple, essentially, demotions to really understand what's going on at the street level with regard to law in the United States. I'm blown away by that. Chuck Grassley, who was the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee until the Democrats took over, he's now number 2. When she came before that committee in, I believe it was 2021 for her confirmation, last year for her confirmation of the D.C. Circuit Court, he praised her. He said he said, quote, I really appreciate your work on sentencing reform, and spoke very highly of her. When the vote came, of course, Grassley was told by Mitch McConnell, don't vote for any Democratic nominees, and he voted against her. But even Grassley has praised this woman. You know, the one little bit of, I'm not sure if conflict is the right word, is that she's not the corporate lawyer that Jim Clyburn had wanted to President Biden to consider. I'm sure he considered them to put on the Supreme Court. Instead, she's a whole lot more progressive, which, from my point of view, is actually just fine and a good thing. So that's my news for this hour. For the third hour here, I'll get into the Florida Don't Say Gay bill and what the Russian space program is up to. But let's go back to your phone calls. Richard in Little Rock, Arkansas. Hey, Richard, what's on your mind today? Anything goes Friday, whatever you want to talk about.
I hope you can clear your great mind to think of something, a domestic issue I've been thinking about. In the United States, when a woman becomes pregnant, she has two choices, give birth or abortion. The male, on the other hand, unless he voluntarily says, hey, I'm the father, can just walk away from it. Of course, the female can use the law to try to deal with that.
To get child support.
Most often they do not. So to make things right, I think in the United States, it should be mandatory that the father be determined. Now, one state, Utah, does this and makes the father pay half the cost of birth. Then he's off the hook. Then it's back to the courts.
This is on the assumption that this is not a married couple you're talking about.
Well, either way, actually. But, yeah, I mean, and the state and the law should pay for that first DNA test. And, of course, if it comes back negative, then I think that should be the burden of the female until the positive test comes, and that goes back to the male. But eliminate the choice. I mean, it's just grossly unfair.
So that would have an interesting impact, I'm guessing, on support for anti-abortion legislation. I would think it would diminish it somewhat among men if they knew that they were going to be on the hook for the baby rather than just basically dumping it on the woman and walking away, as so often happens. Fascinating. Yeah, Richard, that's a good one. Thank you. That was. Go ahead.
I followed your advice. Excuse me for butting in, but it's so hard to get to talk to you.
Sure,
I followed your advice and offered the idea to both parties. Neither one of them returned. Even sent me a note thanking me for contacting them. So, in the last thing, Hillary looked like a president this morning on Morning Joe. I was so proud of her.
I didn't see it, but she has been speaking out strongly lately.
Try to see the tape tonight if you can.
Yeah,
she was beautiful and was very smart.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Yeah, I mean, if Donald Trump hadn't become president with a little help from his friends in Russia, we would have had we would have a liberal majority on the Supreme Court. We would not have pulled out of the Iran deal. Iran would no longer be making nuclear weapons. We would not have pulled out of the climate accords, and the world would be becoming a safer place with regard to climate. We would not have injured and damaged NATO, which Donald Trump did. I mean, it's just breathtaking when you think of all the damage that man did in 4 years and continues to do to our country, along with the people who follow him, like his boy band crowd, I guess boy and girl band crowd, Marsha Blackburn, Ted Cruz, and Lindsey Graham on Wednesday night, watching the bombs fall and applauding, apparently.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
It's 16 minutes past the hour. It's Anything Goes Friday. Whatever's on your mind, we can discuss. We'll be right back with your calls. And welcome back. Steve in Simi Valley, California. Hey, Steve, what's on your mind today?
Hi, how you doing, Tom?
Good.
Okay. Just a little correction. You stated before that the last time the Republicans won the general election along with the Electoral College was 1988.
No. I was very careful to say the initial presidential election. George W. Bush was elected by a majority of Americans in 2004, was reelected. But that was before we knew that he had lied us into the war in Iraq. I don't think he would have been again. But that was the one exception. But that was a re-election. I was talking about initial election, the first time that they're up for election. Obviously, when you're the incumbent, it's a whole kind of different game.
Okay, very good. I didn't hear it. Sorry about that.
Yeah, and I was careful to clarify that also in my op-ed, which is basically what I was using as the outline for my rant this morning. But you're absolutely right, Steve, and good on you for catching details like that. Most people, it would have just slid right by them. Thank you very much for the call. Amy in Los Angeles. Hey, Amy, what's on your mind today?
Yes, Tom, thank you very much for listening to me. I like your program very much. I do support KPFK. I think it's a great station.
It is.
And I think your program should be called the Teaching Lesson Program, because I myself learned so much about a lot of stuff that I had no idea.
Well, thank you.
Anyway, my call is about a complaint I have because of this reason. Many issues, many people have been ignored by major media, including this station, and other people have been given time for their problems, and some other people are completely ignored, and it's a blatant violation of, it's a discrimination. Anyway, this is what I have to say. On September 27, 2020, Azerbaijan, which is a former Soviet republic near Black Sea, with the help of Turkey and the green light from Russia, attacked a section of Armenia called Artsakh, killing thousands of civilians and maiming many during a 44-day brutal and unequal war. 3/4 of the territory is occupied as of November 21st of last year. Every kind of banned weaponry, such as cluster bombs provided by Israel and white phosphorus, rained on villages. Thousands of hired mujahideen.
I ask people not to read on the air, because when people read, it's frankly
because
hard
I don't
for
want to
people
talk
understand.
too much. So just finish it.
Just tell me what you have to say.
All right. This is what I'm saying. Thousands of mujahideen from Syria, Pakistan, other Muslim countries were involved in the fighting, and a capitulation ceasefire was imposed.
What's the point you're trying to make, Amy?
Excuse me?
What's the point you're trying to make?
Okay. What I'm saying is, why wasn't this covered by major news agencies? For 44 days, it was a
Was this
war
the
going
fighting
on.
around Nagorno-Karabakh?
Yes,
Yeah.
and nothing was covered on any of the major news agencies.
I saw some
including-
coverage of it, but I.
Where?
Well,
not on air. I mean, not on major like CNN, CBC, NBC.
Well,
none of them covered it.
you know, yes, Turkey's a member of NATO, but they're not.
Yes.
You know, they're being run by an autocrat, Erdogan. You know, so you know, are American interests involved? Probably not. And Azerbaijan is not an explicit ally of the United States. I think that's probably why there wasn't so much coverage of it. But I get your concern, and there are wars like this and conflicts all around. Ethiopia, for example, is involved in a horrible one right now too. Amy, thank you for the call. Thanks for highlighting that. Share the Thom Hartmann Program with your friends. We're available on SiriusXM, Free Speech TV, Pacifica, commercial stations nationwide, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, on the Thom Hartmann app, and you can even tell your smart speaker to listen to the Thom Hartmann Program. Welcome back. Anything Goes Friday. Dave in Buffalo, New York. Hey, Dave, what's up?
Thanks, Tom. President Biden early on passed a pandemic bill which gave food stamps extra support. I receive an extra $230 a month extra in food stamps, and I'm very thankful to the progressives and Joe Biden for the help. I'm very thankful for the help. But the help only goes until the pandemic is considered over in the United States. And with people getting the CDC's coming out with mask mandates this afternoon, but in general, states are getting rid of the mask mandates, and California is moving into the endemic situation. I was wondering, how much longer do you think this extra help, or how long the pandemic will be considered in the United States, and when will my extra help be going away?
I think it already went away, didn't it, Dave?
No, I've been getting, I don't know if it's through the, I've been receiving an extra, maybe it's through New York State, but I thought it was through the,
it might be, because I noticed that, my Social Security checks went down. That was the boost from the American Rescue Plan, I think it was. So I think it's gone. I'm pretty sure. And I've seen numerous articles suggest, I know the child tax credit is gone, numerous articles suggesting that, literally millions of American children have been thrown back into poverty because, all the Republicans and Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin refused to go along with Build Back Better, which would have continued that.
Yeah, they said that it would continue until it was considered the pandemic was over in America. So I don't know if that is part of it, that why it continues, because has the pandemic been called over in America?
No, not yet. Although it was reported this morning, I believe it was the Associated Press, I could be wrong, but I read a report this morning that today the CDC is going to issue new mask guidelines. They're going to dial back. Whether that's going to extend to aircraft, what it's going to be, I don't know. So keep an eye out, and if it comes across my desk here while I'm on the air, I'll be sure to let everybody know. Dave, thanks for the call. Will in Houston, Texas. Hey, Will, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. I enjoy your show. Thanks for taking my call. One of the most intelligent guys speaking in the media.
Well, thank you, Will. But it's not necessary to blow up my ego here. You can just get right to the topic.
I wanted to ask you about the BRIC. If you're familiar
Brazil,
with,
Russia, India, and China, you mean the BRIC countries, the old...
Correct.
Yeah.
What's come of it? Is it going to be formed? What's that all about?
The BRIC was an acronym, standing, like I said, for Brazil, Russia, India, and China. It was a big deal, basically a decade or a decade and a half ago, as a place to invest your money. This was the emerging market, the kind of third world countries that aspire to become first world countries. And, it was a hot thing in investment circles, investing in BRIC countries. I don't think anybody has been talking about it, though, since the Trump presidency, because Bolsonaro, took over Brazil, and Brazil has gone to hell in a handbasket. Ever since Putin started imprisoning his political opponents, Russia's been in trouble. India has now, you've got Modi, who's running India like like worse than Trump. I mean, he's fomenting anti-Muslim sentiments. He's using religion against his political opponents. And China, China's still doing well, but I think that both the pandemic and the situation in Europe right now are reminding the world of the importance of individual self-reliance, individual national self-reliance. I think a lot of people are now looking back with regard to China. A lot of people are now looking back on that decision that was made by the Reagan and Bush administrations to negotiate the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, leading to the WTO, and to negotiate NAFTA, and then the Clinton administration's decision to put those things into place on the advice of idiots like Larry Summers. And, we're looking back on that going, whoa, shouldn't have done that. So I think the BRIC thing is gone, Will. Thanks a lot for the call, though. Julie in Towson, Michigan. Hey, Julie, what's up?
Hi, it's Posen. Listen, I was wondering, what are the chances of Biden being able to appoint Supreme Court justices?
In other words, do you think you're asking me if Mitch McConnell is going to be able to block this the way he did Merrick Garland? I don't think he can, because he doesn't control the Senate. If Biden loses one senator on this, like we saw with Build Back Better and we saw with voting rights, then you've got a problem. But, I'd be surprised if even Sinema and Manchin are going to go that, right-wing toady. I mean, we'll find out.
It wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, it wouldn't shock me. It would surprise me. Although, I never expected, I really, honest to God, never expected that Manchin and Sinema would block voting rights in America. I mean, that is so beyond the pale. And the fact that they did that, and they did it, in basically dancing to the tune of right-wing oligarchs in the United States, and the Republican Party, obviously, was just shocking to me. So we'll see how they respond to this nominee, to Judge Jackson's nomination. But I'm hoping that this will be, the smooth confirmation hearings and a good, clean placement on the Supreme Court. 27 minutes past the hour. It's Anything Goes Friday. Back with your calls on the other side of the break.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Talk radio for the rest of us, and Talk TV, and Talk YouTube, and Talk Twitter, and everything else. Back with your calls right after this. Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is The Brainwashing of My Dad, How the Rise of the Right-Wing Media Changed a Father and Divided Our Nation and How We Can Fight Back, by Jen Senko. This is from Chapter 6, How Talk Radio Hijacked My Dad. In 1984, Reagan was reelected in a landslide victory against liberal Democrat Walter Mondale. That year was also when everything began to change for my dad and our family. In 1984, Dad retired from his job with the federal government at age 62. Both my parents missed being near the shore, so they moved back to New Jersey and settled in Toms River, a town where there was a large retired population. Still energetic, my father got a part-time engineering job 3 or 4 days a week, necessitating a long solo commute by car. He didn't want to waste time on music while driving. He wanted to be stimulated mentally, and he discovered talk radio to keep himself company. At the time, Bob Grant was the dominant talk radio personality. Often called the conservative radio, Grant was an openly racist, sexist, far-right shock jock. On his WABC radio show, he referred to blacks and Hispanics as savages. He believed them to be inferior, and he once even called Martin Luther King Jr. a slimeball. With his combative and testy style, he was considered a pioneer of the talk radio format. Soon, Grant became my dad's commuting buddy. I didn't know Bob Grant from Joe Namath, but I did know I didn't care for his style of yelling at callers or hanging up on them if they disagreed with him. My mother was not a fan of Grant's either, and she delighted in telling me the story of how she ran into him one day. She was at the Ocean County Mall eatery, sitting at a table having lunch when she saw Grant walk in. She recognized him, and when he passed her table, she asked, "You're Bob Grant, aren't you?" He said, "Yes, I am." She said, "Oh, my husband likes you, but I don't." He had been walking away and turned to look back at my mother and gave a little laugh. She said she just sat there at the table and did not smile back. Gradually, it seemed my dad started becoming more agitated after listening to Bob Grant. Eventually, he became consistently more irritable, excitable, and easy to anger. Little did we know, a metamorphosis was beginning. Along with massive deregulation in the communications industry, there were several other factors that led to talk radio's explosion of popularity in the 1980s. The first was that music had moved from the AM dial to the high-fidelity sound of FM, and thus left a void on the AM dial. Broadcasters realized that filling that blank airspace with mainstream news wouldn't make much money. However, entertainment made money, and talk radio was entertainment at its finest, even when it masqueraded as news coverage. Human conversation didn't benefit from high-fidelity sound the way music did, so talk radio filled the void on the AM radio waves perfectly. The second contributor to talk radio's rise was the new accessibility of satellite technology, allowing anyone to broadcast a show nationally. And the third was the fact that when 1-800 numbers became available, you could have callers call in from all over the country. These factors combined to make a pretty powerful storm. The format of talk radio was, of course, not new. The format first debuted in the 1920s, continuing with Father Charles Coughlin's controversial and anti-Semitic radio broadcasts in the 1930s. Coughlin has often been referred to as the father of hate radio, and he paved the way for all that has come in his medium. Many of the most famous conservative talk radio personalities modeled themselves after the 1950s sensation Joe Pyne. His show, It's Your Nickel, consisted of Pyne debating his opinions with people calling in. Calls often culminated with him insulting the caller, to the delight of his audience. The format of talk radio evolved from there, but many of the most popular shows and hosts, including Bob Grant, Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity, and Glenn Beck, have stuck with the confrontational tone and high-emotion interactions that these early hosts introduced. There haven't been many successful liberal talk radio hosts. Ed Schultz, Randy Rhoads, and Alan Colmes tried to make inroads, but simply failed to draw a large audience, in quotes. You may wonder why conservative talk radio programs have been so phenomenally popular while equivalent liberal shows have foundered. Aside from big money to support it, the secret seems to lie in the inflammatory approach favored by these so-called conservative hosts. Abram Brown of Forbes says of liberal talk radio shows, it's not the same thing as a Limbaugh or a Hannity. It's more general, not really railing against the system. No one's yelling, we need to get rid of the Republicans. They're the worst thing that happened in this country. But you'll hear conservative radio hosts say that about liberals on their programs. Brown makes another good point that speaks to that. Tell your audience that the mainstream media is corrupt and biased, that there's more than that, then there's all the more reason to turn to your conservative talk radio to get the truth. Anger is a hot commodity. Finding an enemy is even hotter. Or as Ailes might say, it's the emotions, stupid. He did not actually say that. A little-known but very chilling example of how powerfully influential radio can be is the 1994 Rwandan genocide, where an estimated 800,000 citizens were brutally murdered by their fellow citizens, the Hutus. This happened after an intense radio campaign that started in 1993 dehumanized and demonized one group, the Tutsis. Militia groups were formed, and police and soldiers joined them in the killing. Samantha Power, who later served as the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, said killers often carried a machete in one hand and a transistor radio in the other hand. Dad discovers Rush Limbaugh. About a year or so after working part-time in his long commute, my dad officially retired. The book, The Brainwashing of My Dad, by Jen Senko. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. 34 minutes past the hour. Welcome back. So one of the big questions out there has been, is Russia going to stop at Ukraine? Is that going to be the end of their ambition? Or are they going to go beyond that? Are they going to challenge NATO? Are they going to see if NATO's a paper tiger? As I'm guessing Putin thinks they are. And one of the Russian spokespeople just essentially threatened Finland and Sweden, saying that they should not look to NATO for their security. Finland and Sweden are not members of NATO. I told you a couple days ago that my guess, my bet, if I had to make one, would be that Finland and Sweden would be joining NATO soon, or at least taking steps to do so. And yesterday, they made, both of them made a gesture in that direction. And now Russia is saying, be very, this is dangerous for you, essentially. So that argues that this is going, and tip of the hat to Bob Jimmy for letting me know that. In fact, I'm going to follow you, Bob. This is, shoo. This may well not be just some, I was going to say small, but Ukraine is the size of Texas. I mean, you can't call that small, and it has a healthier economy, frankly, than the economy of Russia. It sounds large, but it's healthier. Remarkable. Michael in Chicago. Hey, Michael, what's on your mind?
Yeah, how you doing, man?
Good. You need to get your mouth next to your microphone, though, for us to be able to hear you.
Okay.
You can keep it on speaker. Just stick it up by your mouth.
Okay. I'm calling about the hypocrisy of America, NATO, even Russia.
I'm listening.
I remember weapons of mass destruction. I remember the Gulf of Tonkin.
No, me too.
I remember even not too long ago what Biden said. No one man borders of countries by himself. When we recognized Morocco against the Sahrawis.
I can't speak to that. I don't know what you're talking about. But Michael, yeah, the United States has been extremely hypocritical, and this is one of the real difficulties that Anthony Blinken had, our Secretary of State, when he went before the UN, and he acknowledged it. That Bush and Cheney had lied to the United Nations, had lied to the world, had lied to our allies. They said they had proof that there was weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, and there weren't. And these were the guys that Bush, back in 1999, the year before he ran for president, told Mickey Herskowitz, his biographer, in fact, I've got the clip of it here, I'll share this with you, This is why we went into Iraq. Here's Cindy Sheehan, whose son died in this war, telling us.
As a matter of fact, in interviews in 1999 with respected journalist, Bush family friend Mickey Herskowitz, then Governor George Bush stated, "One of the keys to being seen as a great leader is to be seen as commander-in-chief. My father had all this political capital built up when he drove the Iraqis out of Kuwait, and he wasted it. If I have a chance to invade, if I had that much capital, I'm not going to waste it. Past that I want to get past, and I'm going to have a successful presidency," end quote.
And he did, and that's why he got reelected. The only Republican in 34 years to win a national presidential election, and it was not his first one. He lost his first one in 2000 by 500,000 votes. But this was his reelection because of that war. War creates a rally around the flag effect, and that clearly, has damaged America badly. Bush and Cheney damaged America. We just have to acknowledge it. Just like Nixon and LBJ damaged America with Vietnam. We just need to be honest about that. But that doesn't mean that we should just say, okay, Mr. Putin, go for it, or Mr. Erdogan, go for it, or Mr. Xi, go for it, or what, Mr. Modi, take Kashmir, whatever. It doesn't mean that we should be, we should just shut up, put our tail between our legs. We need to clean up our own act, but we also need to go ahead with that stuff. Thank you very much for the call. Nancy in Woodland, California. Hey, Nancy, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, I'm just wondering if you've seen Greg Powell's latest newsletter.
I have. In fact, I'm going to be talking.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, we reached out to him this morning to come on the show and talk about it. He didn't get back to us in time for us to organize it around the show. But his premise, but I am going to be talking to him on the phone after I get off the air this afternoon about some other things. Greg's argument is that if we ended the oil embargo against Venezuela, it would lower world oil prices, start dumping more oil on the national. I want to talk to Greg about it before we go on the air, because I have 2 points of skepticism with regard to that. One is that the refinery capacity in Venezuela, and for that matter, the drilling and export capacity, has been seriously degraded over the last couple of decades as a consequence of all the corruption in that country. And secondly, the kind of oil that they produce is what's called high sulfur oil. It's a real dirty oil, and it requires a very special and unique kind of refinery. It's just like, I believe it was Koch Industries built that refinery down in Texas, right on the Gulf Coast, so that they could take Keystone XL pipeline coal slurry from Canada, refine it, and then sell the refined products overseas. You would have to, so it took a unique kind of refinery to be able to deal with the stuff coming from Keystone XL. It would be the same thing with the oil out of Venezuela. So I just wanted to fact check it a little before I, went off on it, I guess.
Oh, okay, that's great. Yeah,
but he may be right.
Really
he may well be right. Greg used to report from Venezuela. He knows a hell of a lot more about Venezuela than I do. So hopefully we can follow up on that next week when I've had an opportunity to actually, learn a little more about it. I don't like to just walk into things on the air cold and not know what I'm talking about.
Oh, that'd be great. I hope you do that. It'd be wonderful to hear what you have to say after talking to him.
Great. Nancy, thank you very much for the call. Charlie in Austin, Texas. Hey, Charlie, what's on your mind?
Yeah, I'd like to discuss the Supreme Court nominee and actually further Supreme Court nominees. With his current nominee, she seems great, and she comes from Harvard. And as far as
she has 2 degrees from Harvard, one cum laude and the other magna cum laude.
Yeah, and that's fine and all, and I'm not arguing against this specific nominee. What I would suggest is that we could add more justices to the Supreme Court, and increase it from 9 to a larger number. But the additional justices on top of that would come from public universities rather than these powerhouse schools that tend to have all of the power.
Right.
Because the last several nominees have come from like Georgetown University, Yale, Harvard, those types of institutions, and that's fine and great and all. But at the same time, the public interest the public isn't like aware of how good the public schools and public universities can be in shaping the justice system. I mean, the justice system doesn't just need a couple central figures that command from up high to say, hey, this is how it's going to be. It should be a more diverse and more diffuse center of power.
In principle, Charlie, I absolutely agree with you. If you look at Supreme Court justices, and I did a deep dive on this when I wrote the book, The Hidden History of the Supreme Court and the Betrayal of America. You look at the justices basically prior to the 1950s and 60s, what you'll find is actually some diversity in the education of the justices going all the way back to the founding of the Republic. But the recent, what has happened is because the president nominates a justice, and then it goes before the Senate, and the Senate has to confirm that justice. And the Senate has gotten more and more and more politically polarized since in a big way since the 80s. And the consequence of that political polarization is that presidents are looking for nominees that people can't criticize. And nominees who have just mind-boggling, who could ever criticize? I mean, Judge Jackson, she's got 2 degrees from Harvard, one with honors, one with special honors. Big deal. So, I understand why presidents do that, and I would love to see, somebody from a smaller law school get on the court. I think it would be, a cool thing. But given the current political environment, I doubt that's going to happen. But to your point, I think the fact that Judge Jackson left a wealthy and powerful law firm and a big high salary and went off to become a public defender to learn the law from how our legal system works, literally from the ground up, as a public defender, at the bottom of the barrel there, essentially for law. That astonishes me. That gives me so much respect for her. But anyhow, back to your calls. Leslie in Greenville, Mississippi. Hey, Leslie, what's on your mind today?
Well, I wanted to thank you so much for all your service that you've done over the years. I've listened to you for many, many years. I'm a 56 years of beekeeping and worked for the federal government as a chemical ecologist for 21 years. And I traveled to Ukraine in 1997 and then again in 2002 through the Citizens Network for Foreign Affairs. And this was a voluntary opportunity to teach them about free market systems. And this was after they had been to the Soviet Union and had very little opportunity to learn how to distribute, sell, advertise, and so on. And I worked there those 2 times. Mm-hmm. I just can't describe the resiliency and the tenacity and the guts of these people. And I so hope that these people will survive this travesty on the part of Putin. I think he has destroyed, is destroying a beautiful country. And I traveled in Donetsk and Crimea and also in Odessa and all through Ukraine. And though I was there only 3 weeks at a time, both trips, it still gave me a vast opportunity to meet individual people and understand their needs and frustrations.
Yeah. Yeah, it's got to be a tough one, Leslie. One of my kids studied Russian and Ukrainian in Simferopol. I haven't been there, but everything I heard was just, that it's just wonderful people, I guess, more importantly than anything else. That one of my kids also speaks German, and we took a course in Japanese together back in the day. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Anything Goes Friday. Back with more of your calls on the other side of the break. And welcome back. Ike in Charleston, South Carolina. What's up, Ike?
Yeah, hey, Tom, this is kind of out of left field here. I bought a Vizio flat screen a couple of years back and got it hooked to the internet. I'm a real, pinball wizard when it comes to computers. I don't really understand everything, but preloaded on this TV came a channel called Pluto TV. Have you heard of it?
No, I haven't.
Okay. It basically is free with the TV. You go into it, and it has a news category and all the different channels that you can watch.
Sort of like Roku.
Yeah, I clicked into the news section.
Yeah.
It's owned by Viacom, which is now, I guess, Paramount.
Yeah.
But either way, same company that owns CBS, etc. On that Pluto TV news channel, I'm getting, not only am I getting Newsmax, OAN, America First, Bannon's War Room, and all that garbage, but now I realize I've got 2 channels of RT.
Yeah.
And my question is if we have, if we know what the damage is that's being done by these people, why in the world is Viacom, or any other media company in the United States broadcasting this garbage on our TVs?
I think because, we have this First Amendment here in the United States, and we respect free speech, and we respect the ability of everybody to offer their opinions. RT is not, they don't try to conceal who or what they are. And I just think that when we start censoring news channels, I mean, there's also China News. I'm forgetting the name of it. A friend of mine worked there for a while. There are, you've got Al Jazeera, you've got BBC. I mean, there's a whole, Louise and I watch France 24 as well. We've got all of those channels on our TV. And I think that's a good thing, frankly, that Americans have access to a wide variety of opinions and can make up their own decision. They make up your own mind. I'm not opposed to it. I think that the example right now of Russia starting to censor Facebook is not a road that we even want to think about going down. That would be my take on that. Tom in Seal Beach, California. Hey, Tom, what's on your mind today?
Ronald Reagan is largely responsible for what Putin's doing now. If he hadn't abandoned Jimmy Carter's renewable energy program,
right,
we would have been 20 years ahead of where we are now.
And not just us, the whole world would have followed us.
Definitely. We wouldn't have to worry about pipelines from Russia because Europe wouldn't need them.
Yep, I agree.
Next year, the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power is scheduled to start receiving energy guaranteed for 25 years at less than 3.3 cents per kilowatt hour.
Whoa. Was it from a solar source?
It's from a solar source. It's going to provide 7% of their total demand.
That's remarkable.
And, fossil fuels can't compete with that.
No, they can't. The solar and wind are now cheaper in pretty much everywhere in the world. I mean, even in the northern cloudy countries. Germany is the cloudiest country in Western Europe, and solar power is cheaper there than any fossil fuels.
And
absolutely.
We need to concentrate on that so that
agreed.
Authoritarian governments can't extort.
I agree. Russia and Saudi Arabia. Yep. Thank you. Change starts with you. You can be calling your Democratic or Republican representatives to let them know what you think by calling 202-224-3121. It's the Capitol switchboard. It'll get you right through to them. We have not in the United States historically protected people's feelings by law. We protect, people from being victims of actions. You can't be discriminated against in a store or a restaurant or a mortgage or anything else based on your race or your gender or your ethnicity or in many cases your sexual identity or gender identity. But it is not typically, typically we don't put into law, you may not hurt somebody's feelings. But that's exactly what Florida is doing with their so-called Woke Act, the Stop the Wrongs to Our Kids and Employees Act, which basically threatens teachers if they cause their white children or any children to, quote, feel discomfort, guilt, or anguish as a result of what's being taught. This is a dangerous precedent. There's a whole video about it over at thomhartmann.com. You can check it out. And welcome back. Picking up your phone calls here. Harry in Providence, Rhode Island. Hey, Harry, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. First, I want to say I enjoyed meeting you briefly about 2015 when you and Bernie Sanders were speaking in Massachusetts.
Oh, thank you.
And, yeah, pertaining to my question today, I have to start by saying, frankly, I'm amazed that you have written so many books. You publish 5 rants a week, and you have 15 hours a week of television programming. I don't know how you do it.
I don't have a life, Harry. It's just that simple. I mean, literally, Louise and I work from 5:30 in the morning until around 6 o'clock every night on writing and on doing this show. It's just, I don't have. But, it's fine. I mean, I'm at the point in my life where I think that this work is really, really vital, and I don't have anything to prove to anybody, and I'm not trying to, build an empire or anything. It's, but anyway, back to you, Harry. I'm sorry.
I hear you. It's fulfilling. And what I want to say, I can't get over the hump. I've written a newspaper column weekly on spirituality and ethics for a few years, and my dream has been to publish books, and I've got 3 that are at least half written, but I can't get over the finish line. For me, writing and marketing a book is more difficult by magnitudes of order than writing a newspaper column. So I would like to ask for your advice. How do I overcome the obstacles? Any suggestions along the lines of time management, marketing, or anything else that could help me achieve this lifetime goal?
Sure. Well, I'll tell you my story, and maybe it'll be of value to you, Harry. Back in the 1980s, I guess it was, early 1980s. I have an old friend. His name is Michael Kurland, and he's a science fiction writer. And he lived in New York at the time. And I've known Michael since the 70s. And I was visiting him. We were having breakfast in his apartment. And sitting on his table, ready to go off to his agent, was this 300-page thick manuscript, for his next science fiction novel. And I was writing at the time for Ziff Davis Publications. I was writing for Popular Computing and a whole bunch of magazines and making a living doing it. This was '83, but I'd always wanted to write a book, but I'd never done it. And I looked at that stack, at that manuscript, and I said, Michael, how do you do that? How do you do that? Because like you said, it just always seemed to me like, whoa, I can't get over that hump. And Michael said, 5 pages a day. And I said, what do you mean 5 pages a day? He said, if you write 5 pages a day, then you write basically a book or 2 a year. And he said, I write 5 pages a day on the first draft of the book, and then I edit at 15 pages a day. And I said, well, how long does that take? And he said, well, sometimes I'm done in the first half hour of the morning. I get up, have my coffee, sit down at the computer, and start writing. Sometimes it takes me 30 minutes to write 5 pages. Sometimes I'm still writing at 7 o'clock at night, but I don't leave my computer until I've done my 5 pages. And so then I said, well, if it only takes you a half hour to knock out your 5 pages, why don't you then do 10 pages? And he said, because I've learned that if I do 10 pages, then the next day after 5 pages, I start feeling guilty for not doing the 10 pages. And so I just do 5 pages a day. So, I thought, could it really be that simple? So I came home and I told Louise, being the chronic obsessive overachiever that I am, I said, I'm going to start writing 10 pages a day. And she was like, okay. And 3 bad novels later, and I've written a whole bunch of novels that nobody's ever read and nobody ever should, but that's how you learn to write. As Arthur C. Clarke, he said, your first 1,000,000 words are practice. And my first 1,000,000 words literally were practice. I wrote, 350,000-word novels and more. And it works. It just, if you just write every day. I write 6 days a week. Typically I write 7 days a week, but I absolutely require myself to write 6 days a week. And wow. And even if it's just a half hour, an hour a day, but if you can get your 5 pages a day, Harry, I promise you'll have your book.
Oh, Tom, thank you so much. That is such terrific advice.
Here's one other quick tip, Harry. Have one person who you know, who you like, and who you believe would be interested in what you're writing about. Write your book as a letter to that person. Have that person in mind, even if you have to put their picture in front of you. Have that person in mind, or for each chapter. In many of my books, I've written different chapters to different people. But always write to a person, never write to an audience. Harry, thanks for the call.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More info at HelloFresh.com, code TOM. The Hidden History of Big Brother in America, How the Death of Privacy and the Rise of Surveillance Threaten Us and Our Democracy by Thom Hartmann. More information at all book outlets. Wild Alaskan Company, 100% sustainable wild-caught seafood delivered right to your door. More info at wildalaskancompany.com/Tom. Cozy Earth, better sleep, better you. More info at cozyearth.com, promo code TOM. Views and opinions from U.S. politics and other fascinating subjects too, including cutting-edge science reports at hartmanreport.com. And Dinovite, a whole food supplement for your pet's immune system. More info at dinovite.com.
We say fight back!
In the Thom Hartmann Book Club today, our book is by Frantz Fanon, and it's The Wretched of the Earth. This is from the chapter on national culture on page 145. It sort of reads like Thomas Paine, actually. Each generation must discover its mission, fulfill it, or betray it in relative opacity. In the underdeveloped countries, preceding generations have simultaneously resisted the insidious agenda of colonialism and paved the way for the emergence of the current struggles. Now that we are in the heat of combat, we must shed the habit of decrying the efforts of our forefathers or feigning incomprehension at their silence or passiveness. They fought as best they could with the weapons they possessed at the time, and if their struggle did not reverberate throughout the international arena, the reason should be attributed not so much to a lack of heroism, but to a fundamentally different international situation. More than one colonized subject had to say, "We've had enough." More than one tribe had to rebel. More than one peasant revolt had to be quelled. More than one demonstration had to be repressed for us to stand firm, certain of our victory. For those of us who are determined to break the back of colonialism, our historic mission is to authorize every revolt, every desperate act, and every attack aborted or drowned in blood. In this chapter, we'll analyze the fundamental issue of the legitimate claim to a nation. The political party that mobilizes the people, however, is little concerned with this issue of legitimacy. Political parties are concerned solely with daily reality, and it is in the name of this reality, in the name of this immediacy which influences the present and future of men and women, that they make their call to action. The political party may very well speak of the nation in emotional terms, but it is primarily interested in getting the people who are listening to understand that they must join in the struggle if they quite simply want to exist. We now know that in the first phase of the national struggle, colonialism attempts to diffuse nationalist demands by manipulating economic doctrine. At the first sign of a dispute, colonialism feigns comprehension by acknowledging with ostentatious humility that the territory is suffering from serious underdevelopment that requires major social and economic reforms. And it is true that certain spectacular measures, such as the opening of work sites for the unemployed here and there, delay the formation of a national consciousness by a few years. But sooner or later, colonialism realizes it is incapable of achieving a program of socioeconomic reforms that would satisfy the aspirations of the colonized masses. Even when it comes to filling their bellies, colonialism proves to be inherently powerless. The colonial state very quickly discovers that any attempt to disarm the national parties at a purely economic level would be tantamount to practicing in the colonies what it did not want to do in its own territory. And it is no coincidence that today the doctrine of Cartierism is on the rise just about everywhere. Cartier's bitter disillusionment with France's stubborn determination to retain ties with people it will have to feed, whereas so many French citizens are in dire straits, reflects colonialism's inability to transform itself into a nonpartisan aid program. Hence, once again, no need to waste time repeating, better to go hungry with dignity than to eat one's fill in slavery. On the contrary, we must persuade ourselves that colonialism is incapable of procuring for colonized people the material conditions likely to make them forget their quest for dignity. Once colonialism is understood where its social reform tactics would lead it, back come the old reflexes of adding police reinforcements, dispatching troops, and establishing a regime of terror better suited to its interests and its psychology. Within the political parties, or rather parallel to them, we find the cultured class of colonized intellectuals. The recognition of a national culture and its right to exist represent their favorite stomping ground. Whereas the politicians integrate their action in the present, the intellectuals place themselves in the context of history. Faced with the colonized intellectuals' debunking of the colonist theory of a pre-colonial barbarism, colonialism's response is mute. It is especially mute since the ideas put forward by the young colonized intelligentsia are widely accepted by metropolitan specialists. It is in fact now commonly recognized that for several decades, numerous European researchers have widely rehabilitated African, Mexican, and Peruvian civilizations. Some have been surprised by the passion invested by the colonized intellectuals in their defense of a national culture. But those who consider this passion exaggerated are strangely apt to forget that their psyches and their egos are conveniently safeguarded by the French or German culture whose worth has been proven and which has gone unchallenged. I concede the fact that the actual existence of an Aztec civilization has done little to change the diet of today's Mexican peasant. I concede that whatever proof there is of the once mighty Songhai civilization does not change the fact that the Songhais today are undernourished, illiterate, abandoned to the skies and water, with a blank mind and glazed eyes. But as we have said on several occasions, this passionate quest for a national culture prior to the colonial era can be justified by the colonized intellectuals' shared interest in stepping back and taking a hard look at the Western culture in which they risk becoming ensnared. Fully aware that they're in the process of losing themselves and consequently of being lost to their people, these men work away with raging heart and furious mind to renew contact with their people's oldest inner essence, the furthest removed from colonial times. Let us delve deeper. Perhaps this passion and this rage are nurtured, or at least guided by the secret hope of discovering beyond the present wretchedness, beyond the self-hatred, something that redeems us.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back to the third hour of our program, and to Harry, who called just at the end of the last hour. Those were double-spaced pages that Michael Kurland was talking about, 5 pages a day. You know, I've been trying to keep to at least 1,000 words a day when I'm working on a book, just FYI. It's a topic I love to talk about, writing. Anyhow, it's Anything Goes Friday. I did have a couple of quick news stories for you. I'll pick up your phone calls within just a moment here. The first is that the Dmitry Rogozin, who is the chief of the Russian space corporation Roscosmos, just came out and suggested that maybe if we continue supporting Ukraine, they will crash the space station into the United States. Seriously? This is the quote. This was on Raw Story this morning. Still, I believe it's still up. He said, quote, "If you block cooperation with us, who will save the International Space Station from an uncontrolled deorbit and fall into the United States or Europe?" He tweeted this. There is also the option of dropping a 500-ton structure, which is the space station, on India or China. Do you want to threaten them with such a prospect? The International Space Station does not fly over Russia, so all the risks are yours. Are you ready for them? Whoa. It's weird. The world is getting weird. Meanwhile, speaking of weird, down in Florida, HB 7, the so-called Individual Freedom Act, and HB 1557, the so-called Don't Say Gay law, have both passed the Florida House of Representatives. They're going to the Florida Senate. The so-called HB 7 would lead to a whitewashing of Black and Native American history, and of course, the Don't Say Gay bill would be even more problematic. Ben Diamond, who is a state legislator representative from St. Petersburg, Florida, said, quote, "We are about to start litigating the culture war in this state, and instead of working up here to reduce costs for hardworking Floridians, the cost of groceries, the cost of housing, the cost of health care, we're opening up new causes of action against our businesses and our schools. We shouldn't do that." Nonetheless, the bill passed 74 to 41. Not one Democrat voted for it. And also the Don't Say Gay bill, the opposition that is being led by Carlos Guillermo Smith, a Democrat from Orlando. He is an openly gay legislator in the state of Florida. And he's made a public statement. He said, "We call it the Don't Say Gay bill because it prohibits classroom instruction on sexual orientation and gender identity. But this bill goes way beyond the text on the page. It sends a terrible message to our youth that there is something so wrong, so inappropriate, so dangerous about this topic that we have to censor it from classroom instruction." He said this is going to hit an entire community of people. He said, "I want to make sure that for those LGBTQ youth in Florida and around the country and in the world who are watching, I want to make sure that you know this. You are loved, you are supported, and we will wake up every single day to fight for you because you are worth fighting for." Amen. Okay, picking up your phone calls here. Anything Goes Friday. David in Stevenson, Alabama. Hey, David, what's on your mind today? David, I'm sorry, I got to stop you here. Your phone is breaking up constantly. I don't know if it's a VoIP phone or what, but I'm going to put you on hold. So I know you've been on hold for a while here. My apologies, but I can't understand what you're saying. So I'm going to put you on hold. And Joyce, he's on line 2. If you want to find out what's going on with David or figure out a way that we can get him back on, because David sat there for like 49 minutes. I don't want to just dump him. Alan, and my apologies, David. Alan in West Palm Beach, Florida. Hey, Alan, thanks for listening to Sirius XM. What's on your mind today? Alan, you are on the air? Okay, I'm not hearing Alan. AJ in La Mesa, California. Hey, AJ, what's on your mind today?
So I'm calling about cybersecurity. Can you hear me okay? I'm on the speakerphone.
Yeah, if you just put your mouth next to the speaker, it'll sound less like you're talking to us from the loo.
Better yet, I'll go off speaker. Okay. Graham Cluley is a cybersecurity expert in the UK. He just issued a short time ago an article. The headline reads, "Conti, C-O-N-T-I, ransomware gang. You attack Russia, we'll hack you back." Now, you can find this at his site, which is GrahamCluley.com, GrahamCluley.com. And let me just briefly put a plug in for another cybersecurity expert, this one in the U.S., Brian Krebs. You probably know of him. And that's Krebs, K-R-E-B-S, on security.com, no spaces.
Right.
Brian used to be with the Washington Post. He had a computer column for many, many years, and then he went off on his own. Right. So, on top of everything else, between the space station coming to a town near you, this is a heads up on something that a lot of people are woefully lax on, and including system administrators, because they're specifically warning attacks on infrastructure.
Yep. There's a whole chapter I'm real familiar with this, AJ. I did a deep dive into this, over the course of the last year as I was writing The Hidden History of Big Brother, which will be out next week. And there's a whole chapter on how that works, what happened when Russia went after Ukraine, other countries and other entities that have been involved in hacking, and how I think that this is, frankly, how the next war is going to break out. One of the stories I was going to do right after the break, but you just brought it up, so I'll just share it with you right now. This is from Reuters, and I don't know if you caught this, AJ. The government of Ukraine, I'm just reading from the story, just straight up. The government of Ukraine is asking for volunteers from the country's hacker underground to help protect critical infrastructure and conduct cyber spying missions against Russian troops. They're asking hackers and cybersecurity experts to submit an application via Google Docs, including their specialties such as malware development and professional references. Yegor Aushev, co-founder of a cybersecurity company in Kiev, wrote the post. He said that volunteers would be divided into defensive and offensive cyber units. The defensive unit would be employed to defend infrastructure such as power plants and water systems. The offensive volunteer unit, he said he's organizing, would help Ukraine's military conduct digital espionage operations. He said, we have an army inside our country. We need to know what they're doing. So, yeah, cyber war is the next war, in my opinion.
I agree, Tom. And a lot of folks are just woefully flummoxed by cybersecurity in general, starting with their own computers.
Yeah, blissfully ignorant. That's why I started the program noting that I got a series of text messages this morning asking me to click on a link saying that there's a delivery coming to your house. You need to check it out. And and once you click on a link like that off a text message, they literally grab control of your phone.
Yeah, you've had, unless you're running a browser, I don't do the smartphone routine, but folks can run a browser in what's called a sandbox. There's a program called Sandboxy. It's now free for Windows. Very powerful, very useful. But the bottom line is, if you get something that purports to be from your bank or a credit card agency or the federal government, never ever click on that link. Go to the website directly through your browser, type in the URL yourself, and find out, hey, are they trying to contact me?
That's exactly what I did this morning, AJ. Forgive the interruption. I see a break is coming here. But this purported to be from Amazon Marketplace. And so what I did is I went to my Amazon app and clicked My Orders, and there's no order from Amazon Marketplace. And at that point, I realized, okay, this is a spear phishing attempt. You just block and delete the messages, but do not click the links. AJ, you're absolutely right. AJ, I got to run, but thank you for the call. Thanks for bringing up a really important topic.
Good weekend to you.
Yeah,
bye-bye.
You too. Yeah, have a great one, a good and safe one. 15 minutes past the hour. Back with more of your calls in just a moment.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
We'll be right back. 15 minutes past the hour. It's Anything Goes Friday on the place where despair is not an option. And welcome back. Dane in Vancouver, Washington. Hey, Dane, what's on your mind today?
Am I speaking close enough to the phone?
You are.
Very good. I'm trying to lighten you up a little bit. I mean, you've got this morning when you opened this thing up, I thought, holy smokes, I hope he doesn't have a heart attack.
Yeah.
You had so much things there that were bugging you, I'm sure of that. And you've got one of the dumber callers, by the way. You were, just to give something on this so that, I know you real well, but you don't know me at all. And I was in high school when you were born.
Wow. Yeah.
So anyway,
so you got
I'm
a
not
lifetime of experience here, Dane. You're one of our wise elders.
I've learned so much from you; it's unbelievable. But anyway, I wanted to talk about the jet stream. You and I seem to have a different understanding of the jet stream. I think of the jet stream as being a barometer, and I don't think, to me, it doesn't affect anything except planes that get in it and use it to transport themselves to get it, you know. But you don't feel that way, do you?
No, my understanding of the jet stream is that it guides the air masses below it, and when you see the jet stream, you know, drool down all the way down to Texas, you see very different air masses on either side of it, and the air underneath it, you know, back where it loops back up, that you get this, you know, these domes of high pressure. I mean, that's what happened. That's why we had 116-degree temperatures for 3 days here in Oregon. Is the jet stream basically stalled?
I don't disagree with that. What I'm saying is, though, that the jet stream is like, to me, a barometer. It's showing that either the cold air coming from the north is stronger than the south air coming from the equator, or vice versa, and that's the way the jet stream goes. All I'm saying is...
Oh, you're right.
I think
well, the thing that creates the jet stream is the temperature differential between Arctic air and mid-latitude air. That's what literally holds it in place. And when that temperature differential starts changing from the norm, and it's changing rapidly because the Arctic is warming 6 times faster than the equator. When that starts changing from the norm, the behavior of the jet stream, the integrity of the walls, as it were, of the jet stream starts to break down.
Okay, fine. Okay, we agree on that. I didn't quite understand. I always got the feeling when you said the jet stream was doing this or the jet stream was doing that. You know, I realized that the jet stream is being manipulated, you might say, by the north and south winds that come together at that particular point.
Yeah. No, but
other little thing
you're
I
right.
wanted to say.
It's the temperature differential, and that's also a pressure differential. Your other thing, Dane, real quick.
And being the rotating of the Earth, that adds to it too, don't you think?
Yeah, there's a whole lot of Coriolis effect there, yes.
Okay, only one little thing I'm going to say, and then I'll hang up, and that is I started listening to you when you were talking about your gay ducks.
Oh, yeah, that was like a decade ago. When we lived on the Willamette, we had Adam and Steve. We had 2 gay mallards.
Right. Well, good. I wanted to hear you laugh. That was the biggest thing I was after here today. So don't get carried away, and have a fantastic weekend, you and the wife both, okay?
Okay, thank you, Dane, and the same to you. I hope you and your family are doing well, and you have a great weekend. And I do appreciate it.
And I'll call you back one of these. Oh, by the way, another thing that you taught me was about finances. You said a country can't really do very good with the finances if if they don't have a circulation of money, and I never got over that. And Krugman, you know him real well, and you two agree on that.
yeah, there you go. Dane, thank you very much for the call. We'll be right back. It's 20 minutes past the hour. Hey, I've got a new book out. It's called The Hidden History of Big Brother in America, How the Death of Privacy and the Rise of Surveillance Threaten Us and Our Democracy. Available wherever you find fine books. Welcome back. It's 20 minutes past the hour. Picking up your phone calls here on Anything Goes Friday. Thomas in Columbus, Ohio. Hey, Thomas, what's on your mind?
Hi, Tom. How are you today, sir?
I am fine. I'm not. Maybe I am hearing you. Go ahead.
Okay. I've been meaning to ask you a question for a while. And by the way, it's great to see you back on because I haven't been able to get you. I still can't comment. My question is, how can you maintain your optimism and see the negativity from the rise of the Republican Party, its successes, like getting not passing the Voting Rights Act?
Yeah.
Help me out here.
Sure. I'll give you a couple of thoughts on that. The first is that what is the alternative to optimism? You know, I mean, you know, walking around all the time freaked out doesn't seem particularly useful to me. A couple of days ago, there was maybe 3 days ago, I've got a book coming out in a week and a half. And this happens to me every time I have a book coming out. I start imagining all the horrible reviews and the terrible things people are going to say about it, And I know my own weaknesses of my own books, right? And I just and so I'm walking around hallucinating this horrible future, that's going to happen in a week or two, and scaring myself with those hallucinations. And then on top of that, it's like the world is, Ukraine is being invaded, and the world's going to hell in a handbasket, and people could hack our checking accounts and everything, and just all these kinds of anxieties and fears that invade our 3 a.m. wake-ups and sometimes our days. And I kind of marinated in that for a little while, and for an hour or two actually, and managed to freak myself out. And then at that point, I caught myself. And I remembered this poster that I used to have on the wall of my room when I was a teenager that said, and I forget whose quote it was, that said, a brave man dies once, but a coward dies 1,000 deaths. And I wrote with a Sharpie underneath that, "Be here now," which was Ram Dass's advice to us all back in the 60s. And I remembered that, and I thought, holy cow, here I am, instead of being present, instead of being in this moment, I'm imagining all these horrible things that'll happen and scaring the crap out of myself with them, and I will deal with it when it comes. I'm going to be that brave man who dies once. When bad stuff is going to happen, and it's going to happen to me. I'm going to die eventually, and it'll probably be awful and painful. It typically is for people. But it's not here now, right? It's going to come eventually, and when it does, I'll deal with it. But right now, I'm going to get back to living my life today. Does that help, Thomas?
We can do. I agree with you. I'm just terribly frustrated by what the right has gotten away with.
Oh, well, with regard to the politics, the other thing that informs me is that I believe, and I believe this to the bottom of my toes, that democracy actually is in our genes. You see flocks of birds, every wing beat is a vote, and if more than 50% of the birds, they've done slow motion photography now and figured this out. If more than 50% of the birds move 1 degree to the right, the whole flock will move 1 degree to the right. It's the same thing with schools of fish. It's the same thing with swarms of gnats and bees and things. This is in our DNA. It's democracy. They're voting, and it's majority wins, by the way. And I so completely believe that democracy is deeply embedded in us and is the best system, that when I see challenges to democracy, like the Republican Party is producing right now, or like you're seeing with President Putin going after President Zelensky and in Ukraine and just trying to take down Ukraine, when I look at that, I think, this is not going to stand. This is not going to last. Yes, the world has gone through periods literally of thousands of years where there was no functional democracy, but it always comes back. And I think it's widespread enough that the world is not going to tolerate a lack of democracy. I get it that there are autocrats rising up, and that also informs my optimism, Thomas. I think this is, nature will eventually win, and this is built into our nature. Thomas, I got to run, but thank you for the call. Martina in Madison, Wisconsin. Hey, Martina, what's up?
Oh, hey, Tom. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much for taking my call. Appreciate it. Putin and Trump. I think Trump is going along with Putin because it's taking the heat off of Trump's troubles right now. Now, I know he loves publicity, good or bad, but he's getting some real bad publicity now. Charges, and subpoenas, and criminal charges, and everybody's in trouble there. At least now we got a World War III to worry about. We don't need to worry about Trump no more.
Yeah. I don't know if Trump views the troubles in Ukraine, which are inhaling our headlines. You're absolutely right about that. Right. I don't know if he views that as a plus or a minus. I think that his fealty, if I'm pronouncing the word right, to Putin and to Mohammed bin Salman, the leader of Saudi Arabia, and to other various other of the autocrats around the world. I mean, he's still talking nice about Kim Jong-un, right? I think it's because that's what he wants to be when he grows up. He wants to be a dictator. And he wanted to be that in the White House, and people kept frustrating him. He kept going through defense secretary after defense secretary and DOJ had after Attorney General after Attorney General, and I think Trump is living in envy of these guys, frankly. But who knows? It's always dangerous when you think that you can figure out what's going on inside the brain of another person. Martina, thank you for the call. We'll be back with more of your calls on Anything Goes Friday on the other side of this break here at the bottom of the hour.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
It's your media support group for we, the people of the United States of America and the world. Back on the other side of the break.
In the Thom Hartmann Book Club today, our book is by Frantz Fanon, and it's The Wretched of the Earth. This is from the chapter on national culture on page 145. It sort of reads like Thomas Paine, actually. Each generation must discover its mission, fulfill it, or betray it in relative opacity. In the underdeveloped countries, preceding generations have simultaneously resisted the insidious agenda of colonialism and paved the way for the emergence of the current struggles. Now that we are in the heat of combat, we must shed the habit of decrying the efforts of our forefathers or feigning incomprehension at their silence or passiveness. They fought as best they could with the weapons they possessed at the time, and if their struggle did not reverberate throughout the international arena, the reason should be attributed not so much to a lack of heroism, but to a fundamentally different international situation. More than one colonized subject had to say, "We've had enough." More than one tribe had to rebel. More than one peasant revolt had to be quelled. More than one demonstration had to be repressed for us to stand firm, certain of our victory. For those of us who are determined to break the back of colonialism, our historic mission is to authorize every revolt, every desperate act, and every attack aborted or drowned in blood. In this chapter, we'll analyze the fundamental issue of the legitimate claim to a nation. The political party that mobilizes the people, however, is little concerned with this issue of legitimacy. Political parties are concerned solely with daily reality, and it is in the name of this reality, in the name of this immediacy which influences the present and future of men and women, that they make their call to action. The political party may very well speak of the nation in emotional terms, but it is primarily interested in getting the people who are listening to understand that they must join in the struggle if they quite simply want to exist. We now know that in the first phase of the national struggle, colonialism attempts to diffuse nationalist demands by manipulating economic doctrine. At the first sign of a dispute, colonialism feigns comprehension by acknowledging with ostentatious humility that the territory is suffering from serious underdevelopment that requires major social and economic reforms. And it is true that certain spectacular measures, such as the opening of work sites for the unemployed here and there, delay the formation of a national consciousness by a few years. But sooner or later, colonialism realizes it is incapable of achieving a program of socioeconomic reforms that would satisfy the aspirations of the colonized masses. Even when it comes to filling their bellies, colonialism proves to be inherently powerless. The colonial state very quickly discovers that any attempt to disarm the national parties at a purely economic level would be tantamount to practicing in the colonies what it did not want to do in its own territory. And it is no coincidence that today the doctrine of Cartierism is on the rise just about everywhere. Cartier's bitter disillusionment with France's stubborn determination to retain ties with people it will have to feed, whereas so many French citizens are in dire straits, reflects colonialism's inability to transform itself into a nonpartisan aid program. Hence, once again, no need to waste time repeating, better to go hungry with dignity than to eat one's fill in slavery. On the contrary, we must persuade ourselves that colonialism is incapable of procuring for colonized people the material conditions likely to make them forget their quest for dignity. Once colonialism has understood where its social reform tactics would lead it, back come the old reflexes of adding police reinforcements, dispatching troops, and establishing a regime of terror better suited to its interests and its psychology. Within the political parties, or rather parallel to them, we find the cultured class of colonized intellectuals. The recognition of a national culture and its right to exist represent their favorite stomping ground. Whereas the politicians integrate their action in the present, the intellectuals place themselves in the context of history. Faced with the colonized intellectuals' debunking of the colonist theory of a pre-colonial barbarism, colonialism's response is mute. It is especially mute since the ideas put forward by the young colonized intelligentsia are widely accepted by metropolitan specialists. It is in fact now commonly recognized that for several decades, numerous European researchers have widely rehabilitated African, Mexican, and Peruvian civilizations. Some have been surprised by the passion invested by the colonized intellectuals in their defense of a national culture. But those who consider this passion exaggerated are strangely apt to forget that their psyches and their egos are conveniently safeguarded by the French or German culture, whose worth has been proven and which has gone unchallenged. I concede the fact that the actual existence of an Aztec civilization has done little to change the diet of today's Mexican peasant. I concede that whatever proof there is of the once mighty Songhai civilization does not change the fact that the Songhais today are undernourished, illiterate, abandoned to the skies and water, with a blank mind and glazed eyes. But as we have said on several occasions, this passionate quest for a national culture prior to the colonial era can be justified by the colonized intellectuals' shared interest in stepping back and taking a hard look at the Western culture in which they risk becoming ensnared. Fully aware that they're in the process of losing themselves and consequently of being lost to their people, these men work away with raging heart and furious mind to renew contact with their people's oldest inner essence, the furthest removed from colonial times. Let us delve deeper. Perhaps this passion and this rage are nurtured, or at least guided, by the secret hope of discovering beyond the present righteousness, beyond the self-hatred, something that redeems us.
Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. So if you want to know what the Republicans are for, you'll recall, President Biden recently in his one-year anniversary of becoming president speech said that, who would have imagined that all they were in favor of doing was just obstructing anything I'm doing. And then he went on to say, what are the Republicans for? What does Mitch McConnell stand for? Chris Sununu, the governor of New Hampshire, actually went and talked to the number of Republican senators when he was thinking about running for the Senate, asked them, what are you guys doing? And they said, we're just here basically obstructing Biden. That's all we're doing. And Sununu said, screw that. I'm not going to run for the Senate then. He said they were all, for the most part, content with the speed at which they weren't doing anything. It bothered me that they were okay with that. So then, Mitch McConnell got asked by an NBC, Leanne Caldwell at NBC, what are you guys going to do if you get elected? And McConnell said, I'll tell you after the election. This is nuts. We got a video about it over at ThomHartmann.com. Check it out. And welcome back. Picking up your calls here on Anything Goes Friday. And Patricia in Cleveland, North Carolina. Hey, Patricia, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Mr. Hartmann. How are you? First-time caller, independent, and I have a lot to say about the Ukraine-Russia stuff.
Okay, go for it.
If you could hear my voice, I'm not originally from North Carolina. I'm a Jersey girl.
Okay. So what's on your mind, Patricia?
Okay. I just want to know, we've been knowing what's going on with this wacko with Putin. Why didn't we do things earlier with sanctions? Why didn't we do this months ago? Why are we always late to the table?
My guess is, and I'm not a diplomat, and I don't play one on TV, as the old saying goes. But my guess is that they didn't want to give Putin an excuse, essentially. Okay, you've already slapped my hand, so now I'm going to punch you, kind of thing. I would add, though, that I think that in 2014, when they took Crimea, that was the point at which Obama could have and should have drawn a stronger line in the sand. Although I get it, it was problematic. I mean, Crimea was the one area that probably was, I don't know if it was majority Russian-speaking, but had a huge Russian-speaking population because it was like Florida. It was the retirement place for, wealthy Russians. And of course, there's a huge military base there, deep sea port, and so a lot of military. So it was far more problematic. But, echoes of the Donbass, I suppose. But if we wanted to establish that this is once and for all behavior that will not be tolerated, frankly, I think that would have been the time to do it, and we didn't. We woofed on that one, or whiffed, or whatever the word is. And I was part of that. I mean, I was very, very ambivalent about, going to war over Crimea. And in retrospect now, it looks like that was just the first bite. And, we learned from our experience, just like, the rest of the world learned from, oh, yeah, take the Sudetenland, in 1937 or 38, whatever year it was.
Well, that's what it feels like. It feels like we're back in the Hitler days, because all of a sudden, I'm 62 years old, and I'm telling you, I never in my life thought we would be seeing this in 2022.
Yep, I agree, Patricia. It is distressing, and the big question, of course, this is like, Putin has swallowed this country, or is attempting to. Will he be able to hold it down? Is he, or is it going to poison him? Is it going to hurt him ultimately? The indications that I'm seeing, and particularly the fact that they're trying to block Facebook inside Russia, tells me that he's getting blowback that he did not expect, and if it's true that an entire Russian battalion just said no, we will not fire at our cousins and former colleagues, the Ukrainians, and we're laying down our arms. If that's true, and again, fog of war, you never know, but it could mean that even though this might be a great military victory, in all probability he'll have, decapitated the government, as it were, and replaced it with a toady government, and claimed control of the entire country by, I think, probably next Monday or Tuesday. But the question then is going to be, can he hold on to it? And I think this is going to be an Afghanistan move. I think this is going to be a real mess for Russia. But, like I said, time will tell. Patricia, thank you for the call. Thanks for sharing your thoughts with us and your experience. Charles in Miami, Florida. Hey, Charles, what's on your mind today?
Hey, how you doing, Tom? I wanted to talk about, you were saying earlier in the year with COVID that I think it was people from Idaho, the rural counties, and they were overflowing with their COVID patients, and
they were whacking our hospitals here in Portland.
Right, and basically what I'm saying is that's a hidden cost to blue states or bigger cities. And Democrats need to point that out. And I would like to have a study on that, because that's basically letting Republicans and their freaked up policies, still survive, and all of the garbage, all the propaganda they try to say that Democrats can't take care of the cities, and we're actually using taxpayer money to bail out those red, the small rural red counties. But
right.
I don't want to get deep into that. I don't know. Me and you may have a falling out today, because the more I think about it, I'll be honest with you, I've been listening to you, of course, all week, and I've been getting mad. Every time you would turn around and say, well, Joe Biden and the West can't really say anything to Putin because of what how we went into Iraq. It's basically you're saying that.
Well, hang on just a second, Charles. I have never said that we can't say anything. What I have said is that Blinken had to acknowledge this. We have to acknowledge that we lied to the world. But that doesn't mean that we can't tell the truth now. That doesn't mean that we can't take action now. We must.
Okay, good. But my thing is this. When you say we, don't include the Democrats. Because I can remember, plain and simple, from the time George Bush was running for president, we was opposed to him. We knew what he wanted to do. He wanted to go into Iraq, and we opposed him at every end. I can remember people in Asia. I can remember South America. And even these United States, people was marching and saying, don't go to war. It's the Republicans. And you can be as nice and calm as you want to be when you explain America, but you have to put the distinction in right now. These people are the devil. They're nothing close to devils on earth, and they're trying to make life miserable for all of us. And now they've gotten to the point where they don't feel like the democracy is going to work for them, because they can't get over doing the same things they've been doing to us for years. So now they want everything. They want to take control and basically by gunpoint, because there's no way that we can call this a democracy and they have, like, what, 6 Supreme Court judges and we only have 3? That is not a democracy. If the roles was reversed, they'd be screaming bloody murder right now, and they would be explaining to you, you cannot have parity if the court is so lopsided. And for me, I can't understand why the Democrats, why Joe Biden won't tell the court, listen, I'm going to put some more Supreme Court judges on there. But the only reason why I think he can't do that is because it's like a rigged game. These corporate people, they own both the Democrats and the Republicans. So I'm like, don't lump us in with them. We have to make that distinction, especially right now, because these people, you saw what happened on January 6th, and they want the same thing to happen here that Putin is doing in the Donbass.
Great rant, Charles. We are not in disagreement at all. I completely agree with everything you said. I was out there on the front lines in 2003. Mark Crispin Miller and I gave multiple speeches. Paul, I'm forgetting his last name. Paul, anyhow, he's another author. He and I mean, we spoke to thousands of people in a huge church in Seattle in 2003. The people who were out on the streets, I spoke in a massive church down in Greenwich Village in New York City. All of this trying to stop the war in Iraq. I wrote a book about the war in Iraq. It's called We the People. It's a illustrated book. It's out of print now, but you can still find copies floating around. That was all about how Bush and Cheney were setting us up for a future of fascism with the war in Iraq. You're absolutely right. Democrats were opposed to it. The world was opposed to it. When I say we, I'm speaking of the United States. I'm definitely not talking about the Democratic Party. And Charles, thank you for correcting me on that.
No problem.
Are we good?
Yeah, we always are.
Okay.
I can't see how we can't get you more mainstream than you are now.
Okay.
So this corporate media, we have to. Listen,
we're doing our best. We're doing our best. Yeah, and you're listening to me on Sirius XM, which is about as big as it gets. So Charles, I got to run.
Remember last year you were saying that if Donald Trump becomes president, you don't know if they may lock you up. And that's the same thing with us too, to listen to you. I remember you were saying last year, you were saying, if Donald Trump becomes president, I don't know if they may come for me. You were talking about the fascists. Yep. And I thought to myself, they could be coming for the rest of us as well.
Yep.
So we're all in this fight together, but we need to make that distinction because these people are terrorists, they are murderers, and they are liars. And I'm sick of it.
Yep, I'm with you. A very, very, very great rant. Great rant. Charles, thank you. You outdid me. It was brilliant. We'll be right back. 45 minutes past the hour.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Back with more of your calls in just a minute. It's 45 minutes past the hour. We'll be right back. And welcome back. Larry in Napa, California. Hey, Larry, what's on your mind today?
Hey, great speaking with you. Long time listener.
Thank you.
I wanted to mention an email I got from Robert Reich. I might be destroying his name. I apologize.
Reich
The Economist.
is how he pronounces it.
Okay, thank you. And he basically goes through 8 sobering realities why about Putin's invasion.
I read it this morning. I subscribed to his newsletter.
I've never heard anyone else mention before, and that's why I wanted to bring it up. Mm-hmm. So, in 2014, when we imposed sanctions after the Crimea incident, it didn't really work. And he's talking about now, he thinks it's even less effect because the rise of cryptocurrencies, other digital assets. Mm-hmm. They can bypass bank transfers, and that's the control point for sanctions. So if they can put their money in cryptocurrencies, which I am positive they're doing, especially those who are a little, let's say, not on the level, there's so much going on in cryptocurrencies right now. I am absolutely sure that's where they have a lot of their money. And
that's an interesting point, Larry. Do you think that might be, the demand from Russia in anticipation of these kinds of sanctions might be what drove the price of cryptocurrencies, up into the stratosphere there for a while, and perhaps an attempt to manipulate prices so that they could acquire a whole bunch more on the cheap, led to that crash that happened, what was it, about a month or two ago?
Yep.
Makes perfect sense. Makes absolutely perfect sense. Larry, thank you. That's another great data point for us all to consider. Thank you. Rennie in YouTube. I'm sorry. Rennie watching us on YouTube in Reno, Nevada. Hey, Rennie, what's up?
Hey, Tom. One of your callers last week said that she was a graduate of Thom Hartmann University. I'm a perpetual student of the Thom Hartmann University.
Thank you. I'm not quite that pretentious, but thank you.
Well, I'm perpetual, always learning, and I learned so much from you because you're just you're a historian, very valuable. So Rennie from Reno is actually Rennie from New York and Florida. Mm-hmm. And when I was in college, I learned from my Cuban friends that I would go into their home, and it was the first time I learned about a ham radio. So the people that were Cubans here on this land, we're talking to Cubans on the island of Cuba. Mm-hmm. And I'd like your callers to think about getting a ham radio license. And there's a course that teaches it for free. I'm following up on all your cybersecurity people that have called in with websites. Mm-hmm. This one's called hamexam.org. Mm-hmm. It's free. I don't know the difference between a watt, an amp, and a volt, but I used it and I passed the test. Uh-huh. And cell phone ham radio towers do not use cell phone towers, right, as I understand it.
It's a whole different frequency.
So this way, if there's a communication breakdown and people's cell phones go down, they can use their ham radio license.
Yeah,
their ham radio. And you can build your own Faraday box with just metal and cardboard to protect it in the event that there's some kind of EMF. Yeah. Electromagnetic field.
Rennie, I have to run, but I love it. I'm so glad you brought this up. I got my ham license when I was 13 years old, WAA-MWL. Ended up with my general ticket. It has expired now, and I probably should go back to it. The American Radio Relay League, the ARRL, is kind of the premier organization in that space. But hamexam.org, I'll check it out. Rennie, thank you. Our 1-hour free podcast recaps our show, and it's available wherever fine podcasts are found. And we have the full 3-hour podcast available over at thomhartmann.com if you want to really support our program. So you remember the administration originally said that we're going to give 4 free COVID tests to every household in America. And you can do that, get them delivered by the post office for free by going to covidtests.gov, covidtests.gov. But they said that they're not going to provide free test kits to people on Medicare. Instead, you have to go to covidtest.gov and get your 4 free test kits. Well, they have rethought this. This is a brand new policy. And this will be the first time that Medicare covers free over-the-counter tests of any kind for people who are, or offers free over-the-counter tests for anybody who's on Medicare. The pharmacy, Medicare pays the pharmacy direct, and you pick it up from your pharmacy. So just an FYI on that. And there are a few other dimensions that have to do with TRICARE and a few other things. We've got a video about it that's over at thomhartmann.com that you can check out. Okay, back to picking up your phone calls. Robert in Forest Grove, Oregon. Hey, Robert, what's up?
Hi, Tom.
Hey.
I called about Hi, Tom.
Yeah,
I called about 4 weeks ago. Mm-hmm. And remember Reagan's adage, government is not the solution, government is the problem?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I said, well, the preamble to the Constitution is a good explanation of the role of our government. There's 7 elements, and you said, get me a bumper sticker.
Okay. Yeah, I remember.
Okay, I got the bumper sticker.
Okay, what's the bumper sticker?
The bumper sticker is democracy is the solution.
I love it. I love it. That's brilliant. Robert, thank you.
Democracy is the solution.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing that with us. That's a really good one. Rudy, and I'm going to try and get a whole bunch of calls in here. We've got about 8 minutes. Rudy in Atlanta, Georgia. Hey, Rudy, what's on your mind?
Hey, Tom, you just said something almost brought tears to my eyes. My daughter and I were looking at TV yesterday, and we were looking at the Ukraine situation, and she looked at me. She said, "Dad, why are you so positive? Why you have such an optimistic attitude?" And I looked at her. I said, "Baby, what's the alternative?"
Exactly.
And you know, it's all a mindset, Tom. I mean, I just refuse to go down that dark road, and when I get to it, then that's when I deal with it. But until then, I'm going to shine my flashlight.
That's brilliant, Rudy.
So I just want to tell you thank you, big bro, and have a good weekend.
Okay, thank you, Rudy. I'll say it again, by the way. A coward dies 1,000 deaths. A brave man dies but once. That was the old saying. Right. I mean, it's kind of gender specific, but we all get it. You know what it's talking about. Rudy, thank you, and a tip of the hat to you, and I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Great talking with you. Cheryl in Milwaukee, Oregon. Hey, Cheryl, what's up?
Well, I've got a ray of sunshine for us all here and a good talking point. It's 1934 midterm. That's FDR's first midterm. Mm-hmm. He picked up 8 House seats and 8 in the Senate to make supermajorities in both.
Yeah, you know why that was because he was so successful in passing the New Deal. He got so many programs that were working so well. That's why I'm really concerned about this midterm, because Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin blocked Joe Biden from his major accomplishments. And so, it's going to be a hell of a lot tougher for him as a consequence of that. But you're absolutely right, Cheryl.
Yeah, my point on that is that it's been done. If you really want to research it, go back to 1930 and bring it forward. He went from way over on the Republican side. When FDR went in, they went up. Mm. And then they went really up in 34.
Yeah, there you go.
So if you only have a little bit of a lead, you can't do much. But if you have a supermajority, you can do a lot more.
Oh, and he sure did. Cheryl, thank you for that. That's inspiring. Jeff in Portland. Hey, Jeff, what's on your mind today?
Hey, happy Friday, Tom. Thanks for all you do. Of course, my heart and thoughts are with the Ukrainian people and President Zelensky, against this barbaric invasion. And you opened the show saying you think Putin might have been prodded by China into invading. And I would add Putin was also certainly emboldened knowing he had anti-democratic, fascist-loving mouthpieces like Trump and Tucker Carlson on his side here in America. These two are the in my opinion, they're the present-day equivalents of Charles Lindbergh and Father Coughlin from back in the 1930s. Yeah. And also, Tom, someone called earlier about Greg Palast and his proposal to weaken Putin by ending the sanctions on Venezuela, allowing their oil to be exported. And as we talked about last week, embargoes, they really only hurt the average person. Yep. And I researched it, and Nick Kristof actually wrote a piece for the New York Times in November of 2019 titled "Venezuela's Kids Are Dying. Are We Responsible?" And I would answer that affirmatively. So we should end the embargo there. And
absolutely. Tom, we should have ended the embargo a long time ago for all the reasons that you just described. What I was unsure about is whether ending the embargo on Venezuelan oil would cause the price of oil to drop. I don't know that, and I'm looking forward to actually reading Greg's thoughts on that, and if he's pulled together any research on it.
One thing also that might keep the price of oil lower here, and this is my last comment, is if this is from Common Dreams yesterday. There's over 1,000 environmental groups calling for Biden and President Biden to use the State of the Union speech to declare a climate emergency. Mm-hmm. And among other things, if he did this, it would allow him to reinstate the crude oil export ban, which you mentioned yesterday. That's something Trump got rid of. So by reinstating that ban and keeping our oil here, we might be able to contain inflation, which is largely being driven from these rising oil prices. So what do you think about that?
I think that you have put your finger on something really important, and I don't know if you can do it with executive order, but it needs to be done. Jeff, thank you. So special thanks to Louise Hartmann, Sean Taylor, Nate Atwell, Jamie Holly, Joyce the Hammer Nance, Nigel Peacock, Sue Nethercutt, Patrick Hoyt, Geraldine Halbert, Ron Hartenbaum, Chase Spross, Nicholas Miller, Pat Sweeney, Jabbermaki, Jay LeBlanc, Carno Arroyo, and Carne Verde, the folks who all work so hard every day to help make this program sing. And thank you to you for reaching out to our affiliates and stations and letting them know you appreciate what we're doing, and keep it up. So get out there, get active, tag You're It. Have a great afternoon. Pray for peace. Have a good weekend. We'll see you on Monday.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More info at HelloFresh.com, code TOM. The Hidden History of Big Brother in America, How the Death of Privacy and the Rise of Surveillance Threaten Us and Our Democracy by Thom Hartmann. More information at all book outlets. Wild Alaskan Company, 100% sustainable wild-caught seafood delivered right to your door. More info at wildalaskancompany.com/Tom. Cozy Earth, better sleep, better you. More info at cozyearth.com, promo code TOM. The latest views and opinions from U.S. politics and other fascinating subjects too, including cutting-edge science reports at HartmannReport.com. And Dinovite, a whole food supplement for your pet's immune system. More info at Dinovite.com.